to recap the entire NFL draft. We're going to be going through every single team's picks, let you know what we thought of it, anything you should know, definitely some surprising picks. Also, going to be going over the NBA playoffs so far. Currently watching the Detroit Pistons and the Orlando Magic. Currently, that is knotted up at 87 to 85 with the Magic driving right now. Lots to get into tonight, but what a week it has been for the NFL, and it seems like, sports is kind of supercharging right now where you have baseball, the NFL draft, NHL hockey, and the NBA playoffs all at once now.
Yeah, it's a perfect time. Baseball's starting to settle in. Hockey's at the thick of it. We have some players moving on, and then the NBA playoffs. Where ultimately, by the end of our conversation, some teams could be in the second round of the playoffs. So this is like one of the best times to be watching sports. So I'm excited to break it all down.
Yeah, but we have the NFL draft, and not a lot of people mocked up the NFL first round the way it came out. Most specifically, we're going to start with the Arizona Cardinals, and at number 3, they took Jeremiah Love, which shocked everybody. And now
Love that pick.
people who have had Bijan Robinson are concerned before, because when Bijan Robinson went to the Falcons, you're like, oh, I'm going to get this amazing rookie running back. And then suddenly Tyler Algier started to take away touches from him. And now Tyler Algier, also on the Arizona Cardinals now. They have 4 other running backs on the team, also with James Conner there and the running back you got last year. So now, were you surprised by this pick, and do you think this means that they're potentially going to trade James Conner to a running back needy team?
Yeah, I love this pick for the Cardinals. There's a lot of Cardinals fans that wish they had gone a different direction, maybe got one of the edge rushers, but now their offense is set. I think he's going to be the next great running back, like the Saquons and Jameer Gibbs of the world. But now they have James Conner and Tyler Algier and Trey Benson. James Conner is probably the most obvious cut. He's been injured. I think they can trade him or cut him. And then they're going to have an elite running core after that. So no matter who they get rid of, they're going to be elite with Jeremiah Love.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely going to be elite with Jeremiah Love, and I think you took the best offensive player available in the draft, and this guy is the highest running back taken in the NFL since 2018, I believe. And now you're going to put him on a team with Michael Wilson there. You have Marvin Harrison Jr. Your tight end last year was setting NFL records, and he's coming alive. So with that, you still have Jacoby Brissett, who's holding out. You have Gardner Minshew there, but you take Carson Beck in the 3rd round out of Miami. And if you're someone like Mike LaFleur coaching this team, what you really want to do is you don't necessarily want to get the best quarterback in the draft. You want to get maybe your Dak Prescott or Brock Purdy, where you really like their skills and fundamentals and think they would be a fit in an offense that's going to definitely have a good run scheme, especially taking the best running back in the draft, also with all the receivers you have. Then you also get an offensive guard. You get Caleb Proctor, take another wide receiver out of Texas Tech in the 5th round, get a linebacker in the 6th round, then round it out with the offensive tackle in the 7th round. But overall, I think this is a step in the right direction. Cardinals should be fun.
Yeah, they're going to be a fun team. Are they going to be a good team? No. But what they're doing is Carson Beck, they gave him a comp on NFL Network as the Kenny Pickett of this draft. So if he's as good as Kenny Pickett, then that's a win. You get him in the 3rd round. And I have a feeling we're going to probably see him start at some point next year, see what they have with him, and then go and draft their actual quarterback in the 1st round next year. But you get offensive line help, you get another receiver, you get some defensive players added to it, you bolster your offensive line, you get your running back for the future, who's now the highest paid running back in football, and you get Carson Beck as a project. So for the Cardinals, like it a lot, and I think they're going to be a good bad team next year.
Yeah, and I really like the Carson Beck pick just instinctively. He went to Miami. He's playing on a big stage there. And then even if he has a Kenny Pickett comp, does he wear gloves though? Like that's the real question
Nope.
mark. Because if he's like Kenny Pickett but he doesn't wear gloves, then he actually has a chance to succeed in the NFL. Like Philip Rivers is the only one who can pull off wearing gloves successfully.
Yeah, and he doesn't wear gloves. He's 6'4", 230. He's mobile. He can move around a little bit. He's played in big games, 3-year starter. So honestly, I think he's going to be just fine. And especially with the receivers there. I expect we're going to see him, I'm going to guess around week 10, most likely, just see what they have with him. So I like this pick a lot. I think the Cardinals did great this draft.
All right, so Cardinals did well. NFL.com gave them A overall. Day 1 and day 2, they got an A, and they also got an A on day 3. So good job, Cardinals, from us and NFL.com. And then the Atlanta Falcons up next, team that let Tyler Algier go to Arizona. Second round, they take Avion Terrell out of Clemson, who's a cornerback, 48 overall. Then you take a wide receiver, Zachariah Branch, out of Georgia. A linebacker, Kendall Daniels, out of Oklahoma in the 4th round. Then you had 2 6th-round picks. Take a defensive tackle, a linebacker, and again, rounding it out with the offensive tackle in the 7th round.
Yeah, I wasn't overly impressed with what I saw from the draft. I mean, they hit on all their needs essentially, but not having a pick until the 2nd round, you get Avion Terrell, who is not one of the top tier Terrells. However, they do pair him with his brother, so that's going to be fun. And then outside of that, we'll see how these late round picks pan out. Those picks are hard to bet on, but not overly impressed with what I saw from the Falcons. I don't think this is going to move them up or down any of my scales for next year.
Yeah, and secondary was already their strength last year. You have Jesse Bates there. You have your corner you took a couple years ago in the draft. So really, the weakness for this team has been getting to the quarterback. You may have solved that a little bit in free agency, but I still think I would have rather have seen them go with the edge rusher in the 2nd round rather than a corner. Seems like you're already adding to what you're good at.
Yeah, and they're just adding. I feel like they only added him because they have AJ Terrell. Outside of that, I think this is kind of a reach of a pick, and we'll see if it pans out. It looks like he's going to be a day 1 starter potentially, but I just don't love it, especially when you need a pass rush. That's not what I would have addressed.
Yeah, and you traded your 1st-round pick last year for edge rusher James Pierce, who showed promise on the field but ended up facing significant legal issues this offseason. So you don't even know if the 1st-round pick you gave up last year, this year, to get James Pierce is going to pay off. So it's looking like that might be a wash. And then what did you use your other 1st-round pick on a couple of years ago? Oh, that's right, Michael Penix. So overall, it's been a rough couple seasons for the Atlanta Falcons in the 1st round.
Yeah, I would say so.
Then we move on to the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore Ravens take a guard in the 1st round out of Penn State. I don't even want to try and butcher his name. They also get Zion Young in the 2nd round. Take a wide receiver in the 3rd round, Jacoby Lane, and then another wide receiver in the 4th round, tight end Matthew Hibner in the 4th round as well, and then you go just 3 picks in the 5th round. You go quarterback, another tight end, running back Adam Randall, and this was the first pick taken by a owner, you said himself.
Yeah, so that Adam Randall was the first pick that Steve Buscemi had drafted from himself. He's been the coach for the last 25 years, and this is the first time they ever actually drafted one himself. So he's friends with the owner of Clemson, so it just kind of worked out that way. But we'll see how he pans out. Based on his build, let's see, he's 6'3", 230, so he's got the Derrick Henry build as far as running backs are concerned. We'll see if he pans out. He ran a 4.5, so not quite as quick as Derrick.
Yeah, but I like that they take 2 wide receivers in round 3 and round 4, and then you also get 2 tight ends later on, kind of in the middle part of the draft there. So definitely a gamble. So they're hoping at least one of these wide receivers and one of their tight ends that they take pan out, and then you get Zion Young, which was a really good prospect coming out of Missouri. So overall, I thought the Ravens did a good job, and then the B+ grade that NFL.com I think is fair, but you did fill a lot of needs. I mean, 4 skill positions. Your offensive line is still going to need some work, but you are getting a top prospect at edge out of the draft. So I like it overall for Baltimore.
Yeah, I feel the same way. You needed some playmakers. You got some playmakers in the draft. You got some offensive line help. And Zion Young falling to you that late, he was supposed to go in the 1st round. I think somebody had him in like the mid-teens at one point. He fell all the way to 45 for you, so huge hit for them. So good draft overall from them. I like what they did.
What did Buffalo do?
Oh, God. Well, Buffalo, they drafted edge TJ Parker out of Clemson.
Okay.
A cornerback, Davidson Igbinosun from Ohio State. They got another offensive lineman from BC, and they decided to stay in New England and decided to draft Skylar Bell out of University of Connecticut. No, I'm not talking about a guard. I'm not talking about basketball. They drafted a wide receiver out of UConn. And then the rest of the draft, they go linebacker, defensive back, D tackle, corner, punter, and eventually offensive line again. But the main storyline, and the NFL draft, they gave them all A's. But my question is, they traded away 3 picks. They traded down 3 times in the first round. Then they get TJ Parker. And then the worst of it all is you drafted a wide receiver from UConn. And I understand Skylar Bell is a little bit better than maybe some of these other guys, but you know how many catches UConn receivers have caught in the NFL across 65 years of NFL football? Take a guess. I'll give you a hint. It's not many.
Was it 5?
8. They have gotten 8
8?
catches. One guy had 5, another guy had 3, and then another guy had 0. So there's been 3 guys drafted from UConn since the 80s. One of them didn't make the team, and then the other 2 guys combined for 8 catches. So if Skylar Bell has what was an average Tyreek Hill game back in the peak of Tyreek Hill's time, or maybe just a Justin Jefferson normal stat line, then maybe he'll pan out. But Skylar Bell, you have DJ Moore, who you traded for, and then you try to bolster that additionally with Skylar Bell, who, based on UConn's track record and honestly the Buffalo Bills' track record with drafting receivers, that's going to be a miss.
Yeah, we were looking ahead while we were preparing for this show, and I immediately clocked. I was like, wait a minute. The only wide receiver that the Buffalo Bills are taking is out of UConn, and the last wide receiver drafted from UConn as high as him in the 4th round was 2010. So it's been over a decade and a half since a wide receiver has been drafted from UConn. And this is the immediate reaction I had when I saw the Giants were drafting Daniel Jones out of Duke University. Like, this isn't a basketball player. And the fact that this is the only wide receiver that they're taking in the draft. So it's like the Bills, maybe they have better scouts, or their scouts just have a connection at UConn because Buffalo and Connecticut aren't that far away. But honestly, looking at that, I'm still shocked that this is the only wide receiver that they took. And then they're fine gambling on someone who is coming from a college that has never produced a NFL star wide receiver. He is the highest ever UConn wide receiver taken in the NFL draft, and now he's coming to Buffalo, and we're like, yeah, we're just going to run it with DJ Moore, Dalton Kincaid, hope Skylar Bell is good, and we can turn it around with some of our other wide receivers on our team. So it's like, this was a head scratcher for me, and then I didn't really have a problem with them trading down, but...
You know what's hilarious? There has been 3 UConn wide receivers drafted, and none of them have been drafted by anybody outside of New York. And 2 times it has been a Buffalo Bill that has drafted them. Because Mark Easley was drafted in 2010, and he had 3 catches for 71 yards. And
By
then
Buffalo?
Jeremy Davis, by Buffalo. And by the way, for context, Marcus Easley was drafted 107th overall in 2010. He had 3 catches for 71 yards and an interception. He got an interception somewhere.
Goodness.
I don't know how that happened. Maybe there's a Travis Hunter in a previous life. We don't know. And then Jeremy Davis was drafted by the Giants in the 6th round in 2015. He had 5 catches for 59 yards. The other guy didn't make the team, who got drafted by the Steelers back in the late 90s. So 8 catches for UConn players. And then Buffalo is trying to look again with another UConn receiver, even though Marcus Easley did not do them any favors.
And then your tackles from Boston College, too. And you only had 2 picks in the first 3 rounds, too, which I don't like. So you have 3 4th-round picks, and that's going to be a gamble. So if Caleb Alarms or out of TCU works out, could be good for them. And then you got a solid corner out of Ohio State, and then TJ Parker out of Clemson. So that should fill some holes for you on defense, but I don't think this draft necessarily is going to change Buffalo's world, because I still need to see how players are going to develop defensively without Sean McDermott in the building. Because I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of Sean McDermott as a playoff head coach, but as far as someone who is good at developing defensive talent, he was with the Carolina Panthers with Ron Rivera, on those Luke Kuechly teams with Josh Norman and Thomas Davis Sr. So I do think Sean McDermott, him being out the door, I don't necessarily think that Buffalo's defense is going to be as good as it's been the past few
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, I feel like what's going to happen, their offense should be a little bit better with Joe Brady, but they'll struggle defensively. But I'm not overly in love with their draft. They traded back a number of times. They got a bunch of different picks. We'll see if any of them pan out, but they have more picks that they can hope to hit on. If this Skylar Bell guy is the first UConn superstar, we'll see. And then some offensive line help. So they addressed their needs. We'll see how these all pan out. A lot of these picks are third day draft picks, and it's always a gamble whether those pay off.
Yeah, and Buffalo, yeah, looks like they gave them an A for each day. So NFL likes them. There's also bias towards the Buffalo Bills. But we move on to the Carolina Panthers, and with their 19th overall pick, they take an offensive tackle. I believe we both had them taking a tackle in our first round mock draft, especially losing your left tackle against the Rams in the playoff game last year. Also, add another piece on your defensive line after arguably signing the best edge rusher in free agency. Then you get another wide receiver in round 3. And how does Chris Brazzell the second sound as far as a name test out of Tennessee?
It's a gamble, but he ran an under a 4.4, so he's got wheels. So the name test is tough. This is a guy that I think could pan out just given his name. I mean, you run a 4.4, I'm impressed with you already, and he had a high grade. So name test, sure. I do think Monroe Frilling's a nice ad. Awaniu, he's hurt. They don't know whether they're going to bring him back, so they have someone else to replace him with. And then Lee Hunter, we'll see how he pans out from Texas Tech. He was a stud for them last year, so I do like that pick. Overall, I would give them like a B grade. They give them an A minus on NFL. I think a B is probably more appropriate, but overall, I like what they did. They added some depth at wide receiver. They added some defensive holds, and then someone to replace Akeem Aquanu.
Yeah, and I like that they took someone with wheels at wide receiver. I think really you need someone who's going to make it easier for Bryce Young. You don't want him to always have to throw it up to someone like Coker, where it's going to be a contested catch there. You hit on your pick last year at wide receiver, so it seems like Dave Canales has had a pretty good knack for drafting so far. So I think this is a fine addition, but I'm not necessarily jumping back on the Panthers bandwagon saying that they're going to go above 500. Then what the Bears do?
So the Bears, they got Dylan Thieneman out of Oregon. Huge pick. He was supposed to go in the mid 10s at one point. He fell a little bit. They got him as a guy that can replace Kevin Byard. I think he's going to step in and be a stud. Then they got Logan Jones out of Iowa, center for them, which they needed. Drafted another tight end out of Stanford. So they got now Cole Kmet. They have Colston Loveland, and then now Sam Roush out of Stanford, who's 6'6", 260, runs a 4.7.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he's a stud. Quick. Good defensive linebacker as well, can block as well. And then Xavier Thompson out of LSU. He ran a 4.28 out on the combine, so wheels for him.
He's got wheels.
Probably a special teams guy. Malik Muhammad out of Texas, and then Kashawn Elliott out of ASU, and Jordan Van Denberg out of Georgia Tech in the 6th round. But they got some defensive additions in the later half of the draft. Earlier part of the draft, they get a center, a tight end, and a wide receiver who all have wheels. So I don't know. We'll see how these guys all pan out, but I really like what the Bears did, especially Dylan Thieneman. I think he's going to step in immediately and be their version of potentially a Cooper DeJean or someone that can properly replace Kevin Byard, but I think he's going to be an absolute stud.
Yeah, no, you definitely want someone in the safety position, especially the Bears play a more aggressive style of defense where they will make gambles. It was kind of when Dan Quinn was with the Dallas Cowboys, and they're mostly trying to jump routes, create turnovers, get the ball back to the offense. So I definitely think Dylan Thieneman will be a fit in their scheme there. And then the fact that they took Sam Roush, and if they're going to have him and Colston Loveland, that opens the door up where if Sam Roush is good in training camp, potentially you're looking at moving Cole Kmet. Maybe you can get a third or a fourth round pick for him or a skill player on defense. So I do think there would be a market for someone like Cole Kmet, especially with the spectacular catch that he made in that playoff game at the end of it versus the Rams to force overtime. So I think that would be my biggest takeaway. So definitely like their first two picks, and then Sam Roush, you have him and Colston Loveland, then maybe Cole Kmet's out the door.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it called to me. But they could definitely, I mean, Cole Kmet's a top 10 tight end in the NFL, maybe top 15, so they can get some value there. And then the Bengals. Bengals got busy. They saw that their hole was defense, so what did they do? They got Cassius Howell out of Texas A&M to start their draft, and then they got Tacario Davis. Remember also they had the 10th overall pick that they traded for Dexter Lawrence, so we can add Dexter Lawrence to this pick as well. It's got Tacario Davis out of Washington, Connor Lew, a center in the 4th round out of Auburn, Colby Young out of Georgia, wide receiver. The only
Another
real
one. Great.
they needed him, but he runs a 4.4. We'll see if he's any good, which I feel like everyone runs a 4.4 nowadays. Brian Parker out of Duke, so offensive tackle from Duke. We'll see how that pans out. And then Jack Endries, a tight end out of Texas, so still going offense here. And then Landon Robinson out of Navy for D tackle. So mostly defensive tackles, and then throwing out there a couple of offensive talent.
Yeah, I mean, you got a corner out of Washington, and if he's good as your third round pick, then you'd be adding essentially Dexter Lawrence, Cassius Howell, and Boye Mafe to your defense. So seems like the Bengals are going to be getting busy with it. And if you're a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, you don't necessarily need the best secondary per se, where they're creating coverage sacks. You need a team that has players who can just get after the quarterback when the Bengals inevitably have the lead, or can just stop the run if a team's trying to run the clock out to give Joe Burrow the ball back. So I do think them bolstering up their defensive line in the offseason so much is a huge win. You get a B because they don't have their first round pick, but adding potentially one of the best defensive tackles in Dexter Lawrence, like, I don't have a problem with that. So overall, solid draft for the Bengals.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say is it looks like Connor Lew, the center that they got, he was supposed to go in the 1st round, but he had an ACL injury, which pushed him back into the 4th round. So when he comes back in 2027, they might have gotten a good value pick, assuming he comes back fully healthy and back to how he was playing at Auburn. So good pick for them. We'll see how that pans out. But overall, I would give him probably a B.
Nice. Joe Burrow will have someone to rehab with.
Exactly. And then Cleveland, who actually had a surprisingly very good draft. They had 2 first-round picks. They went out and took Spencer Fano out of Utah, who was a top tackle for him. They got 2 wide receivers. They got KC Contraception for Texas A&M and Denzel Boston, stealing them from the Patriots and Eagles. I predicted he was going to go to the Patriots, but they bolster up, get 2 wide receivers. Then they get Emmanuel McNeil. Yeah, Emmanuel McNeil, Warren, Toledo, and they tend to garner safeties pretty well. And then got offensive tackle Austin Barber out of Florida, Parker Brailsford out of Alabama. They go the route getting Justin Jefferson in this draft. Huge win. Linebacker Justin Jefferson. And then Joe Royer out of Cincinnati, quarterback Taylon Green, and then Carson Ryan to end it out, tight end.
Yeah, this is a huge draft for Cleveland, and seeing them take Spencer Fano definitely needed some depth on your offensive line. But now you have 2 wide receivers, and it seemed like that was a position where you're really missing out on that the most, where you probably had one of the worst skill groups coming into the season last year and then into this offseason. And now you're going to have either Deshaun Watson, Shador Sanders there. So my problem is still their quarterbacks, but you took a gamble on someone out of Arkansas, so we'll see what Taylon Green does. But overall, you had 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, and I like all 4 of them. So I do think if they can inevitably get the quarterback, they will be a good team. It's just, who is it going to be next season?
Yeah, I would agree. I think getting the offensive line right, they're going to probably be in the mix for the quarterbacks in next year's draft. So getting two wide receivers there, getting two tight ends, bolstering up that offensive line, I think they made the right pick there.
Then we have the Cowboys, who had two first round picks this year. And they go out there and get Caleb Downs at safety. And then at 23, they get edge out of USF, Malachi Lawrence. And then they also, in round three, take another edge rusher in Jason Barham out of Michigan. So first three rounds going all defense, two edge rushers, and a safety. That was pretty much their only hole last year. And then they go offensive tackle, corner, defensive lineman, and then they take a wide receiver in the seventh round this year. But I like that they just went edge rusher and safety in the first round, third round as well, going with another edge rusher out of Michigan.
Yeah, they had a great draft. Caleb Downs, top safety in this draft. They get him, bolster up that secondary. And then they pass the name test, drafting Malachi Lawrence. And the Cowboys, they've drafted Lawrence's before, and it resulted in three-time Pro Bowlers, 61 sacks in 141 games. Now he's on the Seahawks, won a Super Bowl ring with the Seahawks, but they've been successful drafting edge rushers or defensive tackles with the last name Lawrence. They go out and get Malachi Lawrence at a USF. So obviously he's going to pan out because it just makes sense. The name test never fails me. And they get another edge rusher. Even if he doesn't pan out, it doesn't matter because they got Deshaun Barham out of Michigan. And then they end the draft kind of filling out some holes, offensive tackle, corner. But I like what the Cowboys did a lot, especially in that first round. Your defense should look a lot better. And you have George Pickens. And you got MVS that you just recently signed. And you have CD Lamb. So I like what the Cowboys offense looks like. And now their defense should be that much better.
Yeah, and Cowboys aren't a team that needs the best defensive in the world, but if you can be a bend but don't break defense with a team that has CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, then the Cowboys should be right in track for Dak Prescott to get to the divisional round and choke again.
Yeah. But Cowboys, I like what their first round. They were probably the most exciting team I was looking forward to in the first round, just because they're never going to go necessarily with need, but just with the biggest splash. But get Caleb Downs, which was a huge hit, and then I think Malachi Lawrence is going to pan out for them too.
Cool. But good draft for the Cowboys. And then we go up the road about 10 hours to Denver. And Denver didn't have a pick until the third round, but somehow on day one, they got an A, which is interesting. But round three, they take defensive tackle Tyler Onyedim from Texas A&M. And then they take a running back, Jonah Coleman from Washington. And then round four, take an offensive guard out of Boise State, Cage Casey. Round five, they go with the tight end, Justin Jolly. Then they have three seventh round picks. Oh boy. Safety, Miles Scott out of Illinois. Tight end, Dallin Bentley out of Utah. And then also a linebacker, Red Murdoch out of Buffalo. What a name. Red Murdoch.
I think he's making the team. Red Murdoch, he sounds like a stud, but they gave him a first round grade of an A because they traded for Jalen Waddle with that pick. I don't think that warrants you an A, but that's my opinion, whatever. And then the third round picks, Tyler Awanahem. I didn't really watch too much Texas A&M. I don't know how I feel. All these picks, I'm not overly sold that they're going to hit on this draft, but Red Murdoch, I'm going to shout him out. I think he'll be good. And then the rest of these picks are all fourth round picks, fifth round picks. But honestly, I'd give them probably a B minus. Their draft, a lot of these picks, we'll see if they pan out, but I don't really, nothing to really write home about what Denver did.
Yeah, and they're a team they didn't really need a ton of draft picks. There's not too many holes on this team. So overall, okay draft for Denver. Not too much to write home about. But the Lions actually had a pretty interesting draft here. They had a top 20 pick for the first time in a little bit, and they took Blake Miller out of Clemson at number 17, offensive tackle. And then in round 2, they took Derek Moore, edge rusher out of Michigan. And then their very next pick in round 4 was also a pick out of Michigan, Jimmy Rolder. And then round 5, they take cornerback Keith Abney out of Arizona. And then they also get Kendrick Law out of Kentucky in the 5th round, and then they go defensive tackle for their last 2 picks in the 6th and 7th round with Skylar Gill Howard out of Texas Tech, and then defensive tackle Tyree West out of Tennessee. This is also a pretty good lineup for the name test here. I mean, Skylar Gill Howard, Kendrick Law at wide receiver, Tyree West, pretty good.
Yeah, and Keith Abney, he fell to the 5th round because he got hurt this year. But I remember watching ASU games thinking he was next. So they got a huge steal with Keith Abney out of ASU. And then Derek Moore, another top edge rusher in this draft. Jimmy Rolder, he passes the name test. Blake Miller, he passes offensive tackle name group. Taylor Decker's out the door, so they fill that hole there. So I think the Lions, they get an A for me. I think they did a great draft. Kendrick Law, he runs a 4.45. He looks like he should be a special teamers for them, but he also passes the name test, and they've been good at drafting the last couple of years, so I give them the benefit of the doubt. So, Lions, I give them an A. I think they hit on everything they needed.
All right, yeah, I like what the Lions did in the draft as well. They've kind of slipped the past 2 years on their consistency, but they have been better, so their picks haven't been as high. But the Packers, a team notorious for not drafting in the first round, they have their first pick in the second round at number 52, and they take Brandon Ciesi out of South Carolina. Round 3, they take defensive tackle Chris McClellan out of Missouri. Then in round 4, they take edge Danny Dennis Sutton out of Penn State. Round 5, they go with center Yeager Burton. What was that?
I was going to say Danny Dennis Sutton does not pass the name test.
DDS?
Maybe the nickname.
Depends
but Yeager Burton does. Yeager Burton passed the name test, though. That's a center that I put my full trust in if I'm the quarterback.
Oh, yeah. Pounding Jaeger bombs before the game. And then 6th round pick, they took a kicker out of Florida, Trey Smack.
That's
the ball.
a name
That's
test.
a pretty good kicker name. And then they took Dominique Jackson at corner out of Alabama. So, I mean, you got a B+ from NFL.com. I think it's pretty good. Your first round picks were sent to Dallas for Micah Parsons. So.
Yeah, and Trace Mack, he did set the program record with 10 career field goals over 50 yards. So looks like he's got a little bit of range for the Packers. I'm going to keep my eye on Trace Mack. I think he's going to actually be a pretty good kicker. So I'm excited there. But overall, I'd give him probably a C. Not overly impressed with their draft selections, but Brandon Cease looks like he could be a hit for them. I think Yeager Burton could be cool, but other than that, not overly impressed with their draft.
Yeah, so we'll see what the Packers do next year, but overall, just an okay draft for them. And then for the Houston Texans, the first round, they took a guard, Keelan Rutledge. And in my mock draft in the first round, I had them taking Caden McDonald, but they ended up getting him just 10 picks later. In the second round, they get a massive pick where Caden McDonald is one of the best tackles coming out of the draft out of Ohio State. And that's going to be huge for them, especially adding more pressure to their interior defense. And then they also get a tight end in the second round in Marlon Klein out of Michigan, which was an area where their tight end got hurt. Dalton Schultz got hurt in the playoff game against the Patriots. So definitely a big need filled there in the first couple picks for the Texans.
Yeah, Caden McDonald, I like what they did. They've been good at drafting defense in the DeMeco Ryans era. And then they also get Keelan Rutledge with that first round pick, which I believe they traded with Buffalo for. So get an offensive lineman to help with them because they did get rid of Tyus Howard as well. So like that pick there. Caden McDonald's a huge hit. Marlon Klein, we'll see how he pans out for them. But overall, good start to the draft. And then their later rounds, they had Wade Woodez out of Clemson, Kamari Ramsey out of USC, Lewis Bond out of Boston College, and then Aiden Fisher, linebacker out of Indiana.
And then don't forget about Fabechi Nuwawu out of Oklahoma.
I honestly don't know how I could forget him. I don't know how I could forget about Fabechi. I think about him all the time. But they addressed their offensive line. Their defensive tackle position got stronger. Their tight end position, what's the fate of Dalton Schultz? Will he stick around come next year? So they have someone to replace him next year with, potentially, if he hits. And they get some wide receiver depth. So I like what they did. I'd give him a B.
Yeah, I like the B grade there too. So, solid draft for Houston. Excited about the Cade McDonald pick. And then in the first round, the Colts took nobody because they traded their first round pick to get Sauce Gardner, who ended up getting injured last year, didn't finish the season. But in the second round, they take CJ Allen out of Georgia. Then in round three, they take safety AJ Halsey out of LSU. And then they have two picks in the fourth round. They go offensive guard, linebacker, and then they have a pick in the fifth round where it's edge rusher George Gums Jr. out of Florida.
I don't
Don't
know if that
like
passes
that
the
on
name
the
test.
name test.
Name
Then
test
they have
failed.
Caden Curry out of Ohio. The only skill player that they took was Deion Burks in Oklahoma, which I'm surprised because I get you re-sign Alec Pierce to a lot of money. Um, you like what Josh Downs gives you, but you still did lose Michael Pittman, so I'm still surprised that they didn't take anyone else at wide receiver, especially since you're running it back with Daniel Jones next year. And then the second half of the season, Jonathan Taylor, frankly, just didn't look like himself. I don't know if it was better teams or if he was dealing with the injury. Usually, when you see a player have a really good start to the year and he doesn't play as well at the end of it, he's just dealing with a nagging injury. So I'm also surprised that they didn't take a running back higher. So they waited till the seventh round to take a running back and a receiver. So I'm not in love with it.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the draft. CJ Allen, linebacker. We'll see how that pans out. That passes a Colts linebacker name test, so no worries there. But then George Gumps, that just doesn't pass the name for me. Bryce Bocher, linebacker, doesn't pass the name test. The name test doesn't everything, but the name test also doesn't fail either. So overall, I give it a C for their draft grades. And keep in mind, they also traded their first round pick this year and next year for Sauce Gardner. So yeah, it's a C for me.
Yeah, don't love that, especially you won't really be able to take a quarterback in the first round next year either if it doesn't pan out. So that'll definitely be tough. And then we move on to Jacksonville, another team relying heavily on picks. They had a lot of picks in this draft in the later rounds, but the Jacksonville Jaguars, with their first pick, they take Nate Balkircher out of Texas A&M at tight end. And then round three, they go defensive tackle with Albert Regis. Take an offensive guard in round three. Go safety in round three as well. And then round four, take an edge rusher, tight end again in round five. And then they just have four picks. They keep going into the later rounds.
Yeah, they got Josh Cameron, C.J. Williams, two wide receivers in the sixth round, and then Zach Durfree out of Washington in the seventh round, and then Parker Hughes, linebacker. But um, the name test has failed on all of them for the most part. Nate Burkircher, we shall see how he pans out. Wasn't a top tight end pick that I had explored too much of, but going tight end first pick is kind of a choice. I feel like they could probably have used an edge rusher at that time or really just a defensive player. I feel like the defense has always been kind of lacking for me for the Jags as far as who I have faith in, or maybe a corner. Didn't feel like tight end was a huge need for them, but they get a tight end. We'll see how he pans out of Texas A&M. And then the rest of their picks, they get the D tackle in the third round, some offensive line help, and then really their six picks just feel kind of wasted. But Josh Cameron and C.J. Williams, we'll see if they pan out.
Yeah, it seemed like they were just throwing darts at the wall and hoping, something would stick with their eyes closed. And, you should be able to get a solid tight end in the second round, but a lot of the Jacksonville Jaguars draft is we'll see because you have, looks like, six picks round four on, like four picks in round six and seven, and then you also had a pick in round four and five. So this is a lot of they better have done their homework or it's going to be a tough spot. So hopefully Josh Cameron or CJ Williams hits for them and is able to make the team and produce. But for this, it's like we're really not going to know.
We're not going to know until maybe training camp, if that, maybe longer. And then the Chiefs. Chiefs got busy. This is another team that we were excited to see where they would go. I had them taking Jordan Tyson. They traded up to get Mansour Delane out of LSU, the top corner prospect, after moving on from Trent McDuffie. Then they take Peter Woods out of Clemson with the 29th pick. So going defense on both sides with those 2 first-round picks. And then also going edge for R. Mason Thomas in the second round. Then they didn't have a third-round pick. 4th, 5th picks, they had Jaden Kennedy, corner out of Oregon, and then Emmett Johnson out of Nebraska, Sias Hill out of Cincinnati, and then Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU. But how did you feel about the 2 first-round picks going defense for both sides of them?
Yeah, it's interesting they went defense for both sides because this is a Kansas City Chiefs team where I feel like they don't necessarily have a solution at wide receiver, especially you got Kenneth Walker, so that should help your offense next year, but you're still relying on older Travis Kelsey at this point, who's one of your more productive players last year, and then you're also relying on specific people not to end up in jail or to stay healthy on the field. So for the Kansas City Chiefs, I just don't think they have enough on offense. And I think at this point, it's maybe they're just relying on signing old Tyreek Hill, and that's going to be the answer, or just having one of the best defenses in the league. But they still weren't very good on offense. And outside of Kenneth Walker, I don't really think anything has changed. And then Kenneth Walker is also coming off a knee surgery within the past few years as well for Kansas City. So he could be a player where he goes to Kansas City, gets his bag, but I don't think he's good enough to justify not taking a receiver in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, I think ultimately it looks like they're going to pivot to Tyreek Hill post-draft. That's what the rumors suggest. But getting a, I think getting a wide receiver anything before the 3rd round is always a gamble. And you get Cyrus Allen out of Cincinnati. We'll see if he pans out. But going defense, they did trade Trent McDuffie, and then some of those other players like the Chris Jones of the world are getting older. So Peter Woods could be someone that fills that for them later. R. Mason Thomas doesn't pass the name test, so I'm a little concerned there. But overall, I like that they got Mansour Delane. I think he's going to immediately fill in for Trent McDuffie, and Peter Woods should be good. But later rounds, I think they could have gone a few other routes.
Yeah, definitely. Especially you traded a first round pick and then you gave away a corner you knew was already good. Maybe you don't think he's going to be healthy in the next few years and you're planning for the future here. But if Mansour Delane isn't a pick, then you're kind of in a tough spot. Because I still don't think they're going to have enough on offense next year, especially with what Denver's been able to add on defense and then at wide receiver in the offseason. I don't see them really suddenly being any different than they were last season. So they're just still relying on defense and hoping Spagnuolo can coach the defense to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. But I think, at least with Kenneth Walker, they got some ads on defense. They should definitely be back in the fold next year, even after not going after somebody offensively. But then we have the Raiders. Raiders had Fernando Mendoza, so they got their quarterback. And then later rounds, they filled it out with getting Traden Stokes out of Arizona. They got edge Kieron Crawford out of Auburn, offensive guard Trey Zahn III out of Texas A&M. They got a late round pick, Jermod McCoy, who was originally slotted to be a first-round pick, had injuries, so they steal one there. So big ad there, good for them. And then they get running back Mike Washington Jr. out of Arkansas, safety Dalton Johnson out of Arizona, Hezekiah Masses out of Cal, corner, and then wide receiver Malik Benson and D tackle Brandon Cleveland. So 4th rounded on, I think getting Jared McCoy, huge ad, somebody that we didn't expect to fall that low, but he did. And then the top part, would have been nice for them to draft maybe a wide receiver at that time, but maybe that wasn't the best wide receiver draft. But you get your quarterback, so I think it's hard for me not to give him an A.
Yeah, you get your quarterback and then you shift to defense, and defense is a problem, but I get you went out there and spent some money in the offseason on their offensive line, but I still think you would have addressed it sooner than pick 91. And then that is also the only offensive lineman that they took in this draft, and this was one of the weakest units in the NFL there. So I get, you want to start building a solid foundation on defense, but not only did you not get any offensive linemen in other than Trey Zune from Texas A&M, but you didn't get any wide receivers either in the first 5 rounds. So the fact that Malik Benson is your only receiver out of Oregon, maybe he'll pan out, but I just, are you giving Fernando Mendoza the best weapons around him to succeed? Because you have Ashton Genty. I definitely think he's better than what he showed last season, and you have Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer, but this team's still a wide receiver too short on offense.
Yeah, I think the good news with Mendoza is that it seems like they're going to move forward with Geno Smith to start, and they're probably not going to start Mendoza until 2027. So if that's the concern, like build up your defense, make that more sustainable because their defense was one of the worst last year. If that's their mentality, then I like what they did in this draft. But getting an offensive line, get that bolstered up, get another receiver as well. That's
Would
going to be
that be
nice because you
Kirk
did trade
Cousins
away.
starting? Not Geno.
Well, yeah, they have Kirk Cousins and Geno, so they
Yeah,
have
Geno's on the
both.
Jets now.
Oh, that's right. I got them mixed. But yeah, Kirk Cousins, he could start, so that helps a lot. So I think what they're going to try to do, run out this season with Kirk, and then next year is Mendoza's time. Because Brady sat behind a year, Mahomes sat behind a year, and with Brady owning the team as well, I feel like that's what they're most likely going to be going for.
Yeah, especially Brady has talked about on a lot of his media how more quarterbacks need to sit and learn from a professional. So I do think that is why you would bring in like someone like Kirk Cousins. So I could definitely see Tom Brady's imprints there. But overall, I thought they had a good draft. You got your quarterback, but I'm not necessarily in love with the rest of their draft after that.
Yeah. Then the Chargers. Chargers got Akeem Massador out of Miami, who's a 25-year-old first-round pick. So one of the older first-round picks, but was very effective for that Miami team that made the college football playoffs. And then pretty much the rest of this draft, outside of two other picks, were just offensive line, and they needed it. They get Jake Slaughter out of Florida in the second round. The only other non-picks they had, Brennan Thompson with Mississippi, so another wide receiver. Offensive tackle Travis Burke out of Memphis. Safety Genesis Smith, name test passed.
Okay.
And then D tackle Nick Bartlett. And then offensive guard Logan Taylor out of BC. And offensive guard Alex Herkey. So pretty much I look at this draft. I see that they drafted 4 offensive linemen and they went out and signed a few in free agency. So obviously that's their main focus. Akeem Massador should be effective and probably a starter right away for them. And then Brennan Thompson, wide receiver, we'll see. But offensive line is what I see here.
Yeah, and this is a defense that was already really good at generating pressure last season. Then you add one of the older picks in the draft, someone who probably just looked at him as NFL ready, especially with him being 25 years old, where it's not necessarily going to take him a year or two to get in shape. So I like that. And then, yeah, just taking 4 offensive linemen is definitely important. It's like something has to give if we bring in a couple offensive linemen in free agency and in the draft. So overall, I like that solid B grade for the Chargers. They did exactly what they needed to.
And then, speaking of LA, the Rams, with one of the most controversial first-round picks in this draft. They get Ty Simpson out of Alabama, and some people were split on it, mostly just the Rams front office. Les Snead loved the pick. Sean McVay, not so much, at least based on the press conferences. But Ty Simpson to the Rams, potentially a successor for Matt Stafford. I guess we'll start there.
Yeah, and Sean McVay was not a fan of this at all. You had the call with him and Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson calls him and he's like, "Oh my God, coach, this is the greatest day of my life. I'm ready to go out there and make history." Sean McVay's like, "Yeah, buddy. You enjoy tonight. We're looking forward to getting to work with you." So you have that kind of awkward phone call, and then remember when Sean McVay was making fun of the Patriots for taking Cole Strange in the first round, I think it was, where they took an
Hmm.
offensive lineman. He's like, we had that rated in number 3, and then he was dying laughing in the press conference making fun of the Patriots. And then it seemed like he got a taste of his own medicine this time, because the GM was enthusiastic about taking Ty Simpson at number 13, but Sean McVay was just like, yeah, whatever, I got nothing to say here. I'm going to be coaching in Buffalo when they fire their coach after 1 season.
I have a video from that press conference. I'm going to just share it real quick. But this is his reaction in the press conference as he's talking. You can just see him just pissed off. Look at that. That's not a happy face. That's not a thank God we have our starting quarterback face.
He's like
And then if
pressing
we
his
keep
lips together too. He's like, mm.
and then you see like this is him making the call. I won't have the audio, but just pissed the entire time, which I thought was hilarious. So interesting pick. A little bit of a divide between Les Snead and Sean McVay. I don't know if he's the answer for them, but at least the benefit that you have is that he can sit behind Stafford for a few years, so there's no rush to start him. And really, it's whenever it's Matthew Stafford's time to retire that he'll have his chance. But that was their main pick. Then they got Max Clare out of Ohio State, tight end. So maybe Tyler Higbee's time is done soon. And then offensive tackle Keegan Trost out of Missouri, C.J. Daniels, wide receiver out of Miami, and then Tim Keenan III out of Alabama for D tackle. But more or less just kind of filling holes. But Ty Simpson kind of takes the cake for this draft. And I would honestly, this draft for the Rams, I'm going to give a D. I'm not impressed.
Yeah, and they didn't have a lot of picks in this draft either. And I think you have to look at it from the general manager's point of view, where really he thinks they're about a corner away, who can just make a play or two on Jackson Smith and Jigba from beating the Seattle Seahawks. He also has to look at all of the losses that Seattle had in free agency and think that the Rams are better than them at this point. And Stafford has been talking about retirement for a little bit now. So this could also be a situation where maybe the general manager's playing mind games with Stafford, because remember when the Patriots drafted Jimmy Garoppolo in the second round, and then Tom Brady went on to win 3 Super Bowls with the Patriots after that, or was it 4? I think he won 3 after. I think it was like the Atlanta one, and then the Rams one, and then yeah, I think everything after Seattle was with Jimmy Garoppolo. So overall, I do think this could be an okay pick if Ty Simpson pans out. He's someone who has a photographic memory, and you really didn't have too many holes on your team, and you traded your other first round pick for Trent McDuffie too. So I do think this will kind of motivate Stafford to play well. Maybe piss him off a little bit that you took a pick. So he's already coming back next season, coming off one of his best years ever. And then if this does pan out, and then the GM can position himself where the Rams are going to be the next Packers, where we go from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, and Ty Simpson's able to pick up the offense pretty easily. If he comes in, I think a good comp for him would probably be similar to what Brock Purdy's doing with San Francisco.
Yeah, that's a fair comp. And I think, Alabama, they've had a lot of great quarterbacks come out of there, so I don't hate it. And he gets to sit behind them for 2 years, so I think it's going to be a fine pick. I just don't know how I feel about him as a prospect, but I trust that Sean McVay can get the most out of him. Just the rest of their picks, they get a tight end, a wide receiver, an offensive tackle, and a D tackle, all in the later rounds. Not overly impressed, but they didn't have a lot of picks either. They did get Trent McDuffie with that first pick, and then they also got Roger McCreary as well. So their corners are all solidified. So as far as next year, I think obviously they should be Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, so definitely kind of the most dramatic pick from the first round. Nobody saw the Rams taking a quarterback, but hey, if you're Matthew Stafford and you're going to openly talk about retirement and you're contemplating with it, what most athletes say is if you're already thinking about it, then you're playing with 1 foot out the door, 1 foot in. So I do think the general manager is saying like, hey, if you're going to openly be like, I don't know if I'm going to be here long term, then I have to start thinking about the future of this franchise.
Yeah. overall. And then we have Miami, who had a lot of picks, like a lot. Um, First pick, they take Caden Proctor out of Alabama, one of the top tackles, so that's solidified. And then they trade back into the first round to take Chris Johnson out of San Diego State, which was looked at as a bit of a reach, which I would agree. And then second round, they get Jacob Rodriguez out of Texas Tech, linebacker, and then Caleb Douglas, wide receiver out of Texas Tech. Tight end Will Kamarek out of Ohio State, Chris Bell out of Louisville, who they have a comp for A.J. Brown for, coming off of a knee injury, fell in the draft. We'll see how that pans out. And then linebacker Trey Moore, linebacker Kyle Lewis, safety Michael Tafe, corner wide receiver Kevin Coleman Jr., tight end Sadu Trior out of Mississippi State, and then ends with offensive guard DJ Campbell and edge Max out of Iowa.
Max out of Iowa. We love it. But Miami had a lot of picks, and they picked a lot of positions, and this is going to be one of those teams where probably over half of their team is going to be new players. I think Miami will probably definitely be one of the youngest teams in the league this year, so it'll be exciting. Especially with Jeff Hafley, you have a new quarterback coming in there, and then you have Malik Willis. You didn't really get Malik Willis any help at wide receiver until the third round, but guess what? You had 3 picks in the third round. You take a wide receiver, tight end, and then another wide receiver. You end up taking 5 skill positions in this draft, which is huge. You get the best tackle available to you in the first round, and then everything else, you pretty much go linebacker for this. So a lot of picks here. So even if half of these picks pan out for Miami and they're just solid starters, they'll be okay. They won't be the worst team in the league.
Yeah, and even if they are the worst team in the league, you have Malik Willis as kind of your bridge quarterback. And then outside of that, if you're bad next year, you can just go after someone like the Arch Mannings of the world, be back right back in it. But I feel like they have what looks like to be 12 to 13 picks in this draft. If they hit on half of them, they're going to have essentially their entire linebacking core was drafted here, along with their wide receiver core. So all these guys are going to get reps, which is good. So good for them in that regard. So overall, I can't hate on it. We'll see how these all pan out, but I give them like a B.
Yeah, but if half of them pan out, then Miami will be pretty okay next year. Maybe they'll be 6-11, 5-12. And then the Minnesota Vikings, a lot of people had them taking Dylan Thieneman at number 18, but they go up there and get Caleb Banks out of Florida, defensive lineman. Then they also draft Jake Golday out of Cincinnati in the second round, have 3 third-round picks, go defensive tackle with Dominique Orange out of Iowa State. You also get Caleb Tyrion out of Northwestern at offensive tackle. And then you also have safety Jacoby Thomas out of Miami. 5th round, you go fullback. This is the first fullback that we have seen drafted, and he is Max Bresden out of Michigan. 5th round, you go corner Charles Demings. Take a running back in the 6th round, Dedmon Claiborne out of Wake Forest, and then get center Gavin Gerhout to round it out of Cincinnati. But overall, I think you did pretty good. Did a lot of work in the trenches in the first few rounds, going offensive tackle, 2 defensive linemen, and then you get a fullback out of Michigan, which I did not see that coming. This is in round 5. This is the first fullback that we've seen, and we've gone over half the team so far.
Yeah, and I thought to myself, Minnesota, the key to their Super Bowl run next year is going to be them getting a fullback. And lo and behold, what did they do in the 5th round? They get a fullback. So that concern is no longer there. Then I was worried about the quarterback, but then they got Kyler Murray and Sam Howell. So now I feel faithful that the Vikings are on the right path. They got the fullback.
They need a running back. They re-signed Aaron Jones. I was like, oh, thank goodness.
And they got the pick with the number 198 pick in Dedmon Claiborne. So obviously that's a guy that can replace Aaron Jones someday. But I don't love their first-round pick. Caleb Banks, he had a number of injuries, had a broken foot at the combine. So he's had some injury issues in college. In the NFL, a more physical sport, I don't see that pick panning out. But you get Jake Golday out of Cincinnati. How will he pan out? We shall see. But I like that they went defense. I feel like that is something that they can help. They have the offensive talent. They already have the weapons kind of figured out for their future quarterback. So I like the direction they went, but overall, don't love their first round pick, and the fullback pick was a choice.
Yeah, overall, Minnesota was solid. If their defensive line pans out, really their defense needs to be more dynamic, but hopefully their 6th round running back can pan out because Aaron Jones is getting a little bit older and was banged up at times last year. But we move on to New England. The first round, they had the Super Bowl fresh in their mind. With everybody blowing by their offensive line, and they take Caleb Lomu out of Utah, and then the second round, they get edge rusher Gabe Jackus, who actually led the Big East. He led his conference in sacks last year, so he's going to be a good player for them on the defensive line. Then you go tight end Eli Raridon out of Notre Dame. One thing we know is Notre Dame produces good tight ends, so he should be a solid pickup for the Patriots. Then you don't have another pick until the 5th round. You go cornerback Karen Prunty. Then you have 3 7th-round picks. And you go Jam Miller at running back, and then edge rusher Quintavious Hutchins out of Boston College. Seems like a favor to the college there. And then in the 6th round, you get Demetrius Crownover from Texas A&M, and then you get Namdi Obezer out of TCU. Some wild names drafted for the Patriots this year.
I think my favorite names drafted, which maybe that's what we should be talking about, is the cool names. But Jam Miller out of Alabama absolutely passes the name test. We're gonna
Bayron
see him break
Morton.
out. We're gonna see Jam Miller have a 30-yard run at some point next year, and then Quintavious Hutchins. That is a sick name. BC. That's a cool name. So I like that pick. But Eli Raridon out of Notre Dame, that's the pick I think has the most promise because Hunter Henry's getting older and getting that tight end position fulfilled, that's important. So I think he could end up being a hit for them. Gabe Jacobs, I think, is a good pick for them at 55. And then Caleb Lomu, they go offensive tackle in back-to-back drafts with their first-round pick. Will Campbell, before he got hurt, was playing well for them. Came back, wasn't quite the same player, but now you have Caleb Lomu alongside him, along with the other moves they made for offensive line. So their offensive line should be better next year. And now they have potentially their tight end. They have a better edge rusher now. So overall, I like the direction they had this draft.
Yeah, and you solved a couple of your problem, which is the trenches. We know they're going to be getting AJ Brown in June. There's a deal in the works there, and then um, drafting Caleb Lomo gives you the option to move Will Campbell to guard if you eventually think he may be a better fit there. So overall, think B plus is a solid grade for the Patriots. I did see that Mike Vrabel had to miss day 3 of the draft. I got like it's weird when I'm getting notifications from Bleacher Report that like Mike Vrabel had to go to counseling because of this whole scandal with the reporters, but they're making a big deal out of this one, and I honestly don't think it really should be that big of a deal, to be honest. I get she's a reporter, but at the end of the day, that's something that should just be between him and her.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely blown out of proportion. I get that she lost her job, and I get that it's a scandal. He cheated on his wife, whatever. But I also don't think it's as massive of a deal as some of the other scandals we've had from the Patriots or other NFL organizations the last decade. Like, I feel like this is a very small one. It's like, oh, a couple of horny Italians cheated on their wives. Like, oh, who would have thought? But
We all saw The
it,
Sopranos, like
yeah, I'm like, come on, just watch The Sopranos. Plenty of mistresses there. So I just think it's getting blown out of proportion because it's the Patriots and they always have scandals in the offseason. But overall, their draft went well. I think they should be poised better next year. And I'm excited the most with the edge rusher they took in the second round and the third round with Eli Raridon.
yeah, someone compared the situation to Ime Udoka with the Celtics, like how the Celtics got to the
Yeah,
finals and then Ime Udoka cheated. But I'm like, first of all, that was with one of the owner's wives, I believe. And
it
also, Ime
was.
Udoka hadn't won Coach of the Year before joining the
And it,
Celtics.
yeah, I'm like, the comparison doesn't fit. It immediately folds. The difference between fucking an NFL reporter and fucking your boss's wife, not really the same thing. That would be like if Bill Belichick fucked Robert Kraft's wife when she was still around. Like, maybe that's a little different than, hooking up with the athletic reporter. I just think those two things are not the same at all. But hopefully, both of them figure out whatever it is with their spouses and heal from it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Do you think it affects the team, or the team's like, oh, cool, that's fun?
I don't think the team gives a shit. They don't care. Oh, Mike Vrabel got busy with a reporter. Okay, who cares? Nobody
Oh, it got us
cares. Like
AJ
just
Brown. Like,
yeah. I'm like, oh, and Emmy Udoka, that same thing. You think the rest of the team was like, oh, Emmy, you really did a bad thing there. Like I think they were probably fist bumping him, if anything. Like, you got to remember that this is a locker room full of high level dudes, like filled with testosterone.
do you remember when they had the Urban Meyer scandal in Ohio, and
Yeah,
then
the finger gun.
he had to come in and talk about the finger gun thing with the team, and apparently he just walked into the room. It's like, "Yep, I went to one of my old college spots, guys. Got a little drunk, did some things with my finger, made national news. So just wanted to address it in front of the team." And then he goes on this weird tangent and then leaves, and then all the players bust out laughing.
Yeah, because it's hilarious.
But yeah,
The finger gun. He was
the
like
media's like,
fingering a
"Oh
girl's
my
butt.
god, it should Mike Vrabel be coaching next year?" Like, yeah, who cares? Celebrity. He's still making millions of dollars. Maybe he has
Yeah,
an
it'll be.
agreement with his wife. I don't know for that type of thing. But yeah, I think just leave Mike Vrabel alone. It's just basic tabloid news. It has nothing to do with sports.
Yeah, exactly.
But we have the Saints, and we have been very high on the Saints heading into the offseason, especially with how Tyler Shuck finished out the year last year. You go out there and you sign probably the best running back available to you. You bring him home. Now he's in New Orleans. Steal him away from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then at number 8, you get none other than Jordan Tyson to pair along with him. And then in round 2, you get defensive tackle Christian Miller out of Georgia. Oscar Delp at tight end out of Georgia. We'll see how he pans out. 4th round, you go offensive guard with Jeremiah Wright. Another wide receiver with Bryce Lance out of North Dakota State. And then round 5, you get safety Lorenzo Styles out of Ohio, kick returner Barian Brown, and cornerback TJ Hall. But overall, thought this was a really good addition for the New Orleans Saints, especially with what they did in the offseason.
100%. Last year, you traded Rashid Shaheed, and you replaced Rashid Shaheed with Jordan Tyson, who I'm huge on. Jordan Tyson, if he can stay healthy, this receiver core for the Saints is now the best in that division. And I believed in them going into the draft that they were going to win that division. They get Jordan Tyson, they're going to win that division next year. Just write it in there now. And then Christian Miller out of Georgia, I liked that pick a lot for them. That should bolster their defensive side of the ball. And later in the round, they also get Lorenzo Styles out of Ohio State, who had slipped to them. So they had 3 picks that I really, really, really like, and I think those guys are going to be starting eventually next year. And now you have someone to pair with Chris Olave alongside with Tyler Shuck, and you have your running back. Like, really like what the Saints have done. I think this is a team that wins at least 10 games next year.
Yeah, I think the Saints should definitely be the favorites in the South. Definitely be a sneaky team next year. But overall, yeah, I love the Jordan Tyson pick going along with Chris Olave. Huge pickup, stealing away the Jacksonville Jaguars, arguably their best piece on offense. So he wants to go back to New Orleans. So I'm excited for that. And then what if I told you a edge rushing team of Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and Averill Reese was coming to town in New York? The Giants get arguably the best defensive player in the draft. Everyone had the Jets at number 2 slated to take Averill Reese. He falls to the Giants, and then at number 10 you get Francis Mauigoa out of Miami, and then you get Colton Hood in the 2nd round at quarterback. Some people had him floating around the 1st round as well. And then you get Malachi Fields out of Notre Dame, who's a pretty good wide receiver. And then you have 3 6th round picks. You go defensive tackle, offensive guard, and Jack Kelly. But The Giants' defense next year is going to be on pace to potentially break the sack record. And if Jackson Dart, Malik Healthy, and Cam Scatabo all stay healthy, this team may need to score like, I don't know, 18 to 21 points to win games. I think the Giants, with John Harbaugh, should have the best defense in the league next year. You have the best defensive player in the draft fall to you at number 5, and then you get your offensive tackle as well. I mean,
Yeah, they had probably the best first round, maybe out of anybody. Alvaro Reese, I had him going to the Jets in the second overall pick, and then he falls all the way to 5. You pair him, like you mentioned, with the Bobby Ogarikis. You have the Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau all together. That defense is already nasty, and now it's going to be even better. Then you get your offensive tackle. Colton Hood, you get that corner solidified. Jack Kelly out of BYU in the 6th round. We'll see if he pans out, but great draft overall. I'd give it an A. They did great. And then especially, you move on from Dexter Lawrence, you have someone that can immediately fill in for him. So, like what they did a lot. And I think this Giants team, this is a team that could definitely make the playoffs next year.
yeah, no, Giants should be there to make the playoffs. It's really all going to be on the health of Jackson Dart. Can he stay on the field? Is he going to be in concussion protocol every single game again? And then how is Cam Scott going to recover from his injury? So if the offense is just what it was last year with this defense, I definitely think this could be a team that is going to surprise a lot of people. Then we have the Jets, who also surprised a lot of people. People had them taking Avil Reese at number 2, but they end up going with David Bailey out of Texas Tech. They had 3 first-round picks in this draft because they took Kenyon Sadiq, traded up for Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana. So you get the best tight end in the draft, one of the top wide receiver prospects. And then the rest of the draft, you go corner, defensive tackle. You take a quarterback out of Clemson and Cade Klubnik. And then you also get offensive guard Enes Cooper out of Miami, and then VJ Payne. But this is a team with the Jets. You got some firepower on offense now where you got arguably the best tight end, and hopefully someone can get more than 395 yards. That's the bar next year.
Yeah, I love Kenyon Sadiq. I wanted him to go to the Cowboys, but Kenyon Sadiq, he's one of those guys. He's a prospect that I think could end up being very good for them. Not quite a Brock Bowers type of player, but I think a tight end that could very well be. This tight end ran a 4.39 at the combine, so he's super quick. Not quite as good of a blocker, but if he can run a 4.4 as a tight end at 6'4", 240, that's exciting. So I think he's going to hit well for them. He looks to be a lock. And then David Bailey, edge rusher. He was really good for them. So now you have an edge rusher to pair alongside. They also have Devondre Sweat, who they got in the draft as well. Got a quarterback that they can play at the end of the year if they're not doing too well and they want to see what they get from him. He was a guy that started for Clemson last year. So overall, for the Jets, they did a really good job. I would definitely give them an A. They had 3 first-round picks. If they all hit, then Jets are making some noise. Maybe they'll actually get an interception next year.
Yeah, instead of winning 2 or 3 games, maybe they'll win 4 or 5 games next year because you have Geno Smith, who's probably going to be your starting quarterback next year. So don't necessarily love it, especially since your offensive line will still be a problem, but you actually have some help on offense. And then, you still have Breece Hall, who's been a good piece for you. We'll see if he ends up signing the franchise tag or they inevitably have to trade him. But you have Breece Hall, Omar Cooper Jr., Kenyon Sadiq, and Garrett Wilson. This team should at least be watchable.
They should be more enjoyable for sure. So I like I think they had an overall good draft. I don't know how I feel about Omar Cooper Jr. We'll see if he ends up panning out, but Kenyon Sadiq should be a hit. David Bailey should be a hit as well. D'Angelo Pons, that sounds like a good Jets corner. So overall, successful draft for them.
And then Philadelphia, we really had their weaknesses heading into the draft as skill positions and what they do. Round 1, they took Mekhi Lemon. So if you're Mekhi Lemon, I don't know how I would feel about being a wide receiver drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles in the first round. Don't have a great track record with it. But then they also took Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt In the second round, took an offensive tackle out of Miami and Markel Bell. And then you took a quarterback in Cole Payton out of North Dakota State to back up Jalen Hurts. Get Micah Morris at offensive guard. Then you had 3 7-round picks where you get Cole Wasniewski out of Texas Tech. You get Orr Bernard out of the IPP program. I don't know what that is. And then your last pick of the draft, you got Keyshawn James, newbie out of New Mexico. What is going on with the Philadelphia Eagles picks? I don't know if I like their draft this year. It's like their track record with taking first round wide receivers is not good. Seems like there's been a lot of tight ends taken in the draft, so some of them have to be bust right. And then maybe your offensive tackle will be good. And then fifth round, we're taking a quarterback out of North Dakota State in Cole Payton.
Yeah, and I looked up the IPP program. That is the International Player Pathway program. So the D tackle that they took in the 7th round is from Nigeria, and he had never played football to this point. So
I saw his physical comp was Myles Garrett, though.
Yeah, I mean, he's 6'4", 300. There's no stats on him. He did a couple of NFL camps in the last couple of years, but he ran a 4.63 40, 39-inch vertical, 10 broad jumps, and then bench pressed 31 bench reps of 225.
Oh my God, him and Jalen Carter. If he's good, and you have him and Jalen Carter in the interior, good luck. That's the only thing to like combat some of these other teams. But yeah, the NFC East is going to have a lot of really good pass rushes if he pans out. But that's what I heard. He's kind of just a raw prospect coming out, but he has a lot of potential.
Yeah, little NFL experience, but super athletic. The last time the Eagles drafted somebody from the IPP program was Jordan Mailata in 2018. So they've had success in that portal. So maybe it ends up panning out for them as well. But Mekhi Lemon, I think, should fill in for them just fine. They are going to lose Jalen Hurts. I'm sorry, not Jalen Hurts. A.J. Brown. Eli Stowers, is he the replacement for Dallas Goedert eventually? So top 2 picks. Sounds like they might have a Dallas Goedert replacement and then an A.J. Brown replacement. So just kind of replacing people who are on their way out.
Yeah, replacing people on their way out. So definitely an interesting draft for Philadelphia. I'm not in love with it. I think my favorite pick for them is definitely the player of the IPP program. So we'll see. And then Pittsburgh hosted the NFL draft. They actually set the record for attendance at this NFL draft. It was a great event for everyone who went to the NFL draft in Pittsburgh. Definitely a good time there. And they got to work, and they took an offensive tackle in the first round, took another wide receiver to go along with Michael Pittman Sr., and DK Metcalf and Jeremy Bernard. And Pittsburgh has historically been good at drafting wide receivers. And then another controversial pick at quarterback, they took Drew Aller out of Penn State. I remember the last time they took a player that played in Pennsylvania in college, Kenny Pickett. Really didn't work out, but this was kind of confusing because now they have Drew Aller, potentially Aaron Rodgers, Will Howard next year, and Mason Rudolph. And you know the genius that's going to sort all of this out is Mike McCarthy. So I definitely have a lot of faith that Mike McCarthy is going to make the right choice.
Yeah, I didn't love this pick either. He grew up a Browns fan, and he didn't want to wear the Steelers hat when he got drafted. So that's not a good start.
Really?
Yeah, he refused to wear the Steelers hat when he got drafted, and I mean he grew up in Cleveland, so it makes sense. But his stats are not overly impressive. He had a broken ankle in October as well, so he got banged up as well. He started the first 6 games, had 8 touchdowns, 3 picks, completed 64% of his throws. So I'm not overly in love. He was an honorable mention in the All Big Ten in 2024. Looks like he's decent mobility-wise, but I just don't love this pick for the Steelers. I think it's kind of a reach. And then I do like that they got Max out of Arizona State. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, but he was a stud for Arizona State, so I'll be rooting for him. But The rest of this draft is just very confusing. It feels like a lot of these picks were reaches.
Yeah, very random. Like third round, you go cornerback, so that's definitely a need for this team. But you didn't necessarily need a wide receiver in the second round. I thought you probably could have gone more defense or offensive line. And then the quarterback is definitely confusing. And then you draft another tight end too, which if there's anything that the Pittsburgh Steelers don't need, it's another tight end. Let's see what this guy is at
He has
here.
such
So
a
he's
Steelers name, though.
6'2", 250. Yeah, Riley Nowakowski.
That's as Steelers as it gets. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they have, what do they have? So they have Pat Fryermuth now, and then they have Darnell Washington, and then I'm forgetting another major tight end that they drafted. But they have tight ends that they could just rotate at any time. All big, physical, good receivers, and now they go and get Riley Nowakowski out of Indiana. Not their main hole. And then they go running back in the 7th round with Eli Reidenreich out of Navy.
Yeah, Eli Haydenreich. So yeah, we'll see with the Steelers. Definitely a interesting draft in Mike McCarthy's first year there. So this is something we'll just have to see. I do like that they went offensive line, but if you get another really good wide receiver and you hit on Jeremy Bernard, I think short term, if Aaron Rodgers comes back, then he's showing, okay, I have a little bit more protection, and then I might actually have three decent weapons at wide receiver next year. And then I believe they were the ones who signed Rico Dowdle. Don't shoot me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, they did.
So overall, pretty interesting draft, I would say is the right word for the Steelers. And then San Francisco did not have a first round pick, but in the second round they go wide receiver with Deshaun Stribling out of Mississippi. Then they go edge rusher Romello Height out of Texas Tech. They draft a running back in the third round, Kalen Black, definitely one of their strong suits with Kyle Shanahan. And then at defensive tackle, they take Grayson Halton out of Oklahoma in the fourth round. They get offensive guard Carver Willis out of Washington, cornerback Ephesius Prozek out of Washington, or Prosoc, and then they draft linebacker Jaden Duggar out of Louisiana, and then offensive tackle Enrique Cruz. So for San Francisco, they hit on a lot of their picks last year, and you have three fourth round picks, two third rounds, and two fifth rounds, where they've been pretty good at turning over some gems in the later rounds. So if you hit on Deshaun Stribling out of Mississippi and a couple of these defensive players, maybe Kalen Black is just a nice backup for Christian McCaffrey, so he can take some time off. I definitely think that this is a as good as they could have done draft for San Francisco.
Yeah, I'm not super sold on their wide receiver out in the second round. We'll see how he pans out. But Kalen Black, the Niners have been really consistent with drafting good running backs. Even if they don't end up being starters, they have like the Elijah Mitchells of the world, and the list goes on. And then Grayson Holton, he was a guy that fell to them in the fourth round, so got some value there. Jaden Duggar out of Louisiana, he's another guy that fell to you. So they had a lot of guys that slipped to the Niners. We'll see if Romello Height pans out from Texas Tech. But for what the picks that you did have, I think you did okay. I would give it probably a B, but they filled some holes that they needed, and they got some backups for Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, so overall, thought this was a good draft for the San Francisco 49ers. Had a good draft last year, so excited to see what they do. Then that brings us to their division rival, the Seattle Seahawks. We had them taking a running back in the first round, and they take Jadarian Price out of Notre Dame. That's what I had in my mock draft. And then they have in the second round, they take safety Bud Clark out of TCU. So definitely building on a position that's already a strength. And then they lost Reek Woolen. Don't fear, though. They draft Julian Neal out of Arkansas at pick 99. And then you get offensive guard Bo Stevens, draft wide receiver Emmanuel Henderson Jr. out of Kansas, draft Andre Fuller out of Toledo, so another cornerback there. You also draft in the seventh round another quarterback, Michael Dansby, out of Arizona, and then defensive tackle Devin Eastern out of Minnesota. For someone like Mike McDonald who proved that he could make some solid selections defensively in the draft, I think you plugged your hole at running back, and then you get some more safeties and corners. So you pretty much hit on everything that you needed if you're Seattle. So I'm not mad at this at all.
Yeah, I think Bud Clark, that's probably their best pick. I think he's going to end up being really good for them. Ran a 4.4. Looks like he should be a starter. If not year one, then at least year two. And then get some offensive line help. A lot of the holes that you have that left you in free agency, you've been able to fill. Julian Neal in the 3rd round, he should pan out for you. So overall, I like this pick. First round pick with Jadarian Price, I wasn't in love with. You probably could have traded back for, but you get your running back that can play with Zach Charbonnet coming back from injury, and he was effective for Notre Dame. So overall, I'd say this draft's pretty good. I would say it's probably a B to. I would give it a B probably.
Yeah, don't really take a edge rusher that high, so I'm interested to see what their plan still is to replace Boye Mafe. There was a rumor that if the Giants were interested in trading Kayvon Thibodeau, that they were potentially gonna trade their first round pick for him. So they're definitely still hunting edge rusher there with losing Boye Mafe. But you went out there, hopefully replace Kenneth Walker. So I think you still may take a step back, at least getting to the quarterback.
Absolutely. Then the Bucks, they got Ruben Bain out of Miami. Now, before I talk about who else they picked, this guy, certain guys, you can just tell by the way they're drafted that they're going to be good in the NFL. And Ruben Bain genuinely scared me when he went and grabbed that glove. He grabs the hat and just immediately walks onto the court. And usually they like take a picture with it and they like pose. He just takes the hat and just immediately goes to the tunnel, shakes hands with Roger Goodell, and just gets to work. He's going to be a freight train. And especially with them losing Levante David, this is a pick that I feel, of all the first round picks, I feel the most confident that he's going to be a stud. And
Especially in
then
Tampa.
second
He's
round, they
staying
take.
in Florida. He's already used to playing in that humid weather and environment. So like for me, like it's not only like him and like the way he like walked on stage, but it's the fact that he's staying in Florida, playing with Baker Mayfield, too.
Yeah. And a good organization in Tampa who's been good at drafting the last decade. So that's an instant win for me. That's a guy that I think is immediately going to be a stud for them. And then second round, they got Josiah Trotter out of Missouri, linebacker. And then Ted Hurst, 3rd round out of Georgia State.
You know Fred Durst, meet Ted Hurst.
Yeah. And then they got Keontae Scott out of Miami. So they stay in Miami. They got another guy in the 4th round to pair with Ruben Bain. And then DeMonte Capehart out of Clemson, Billy Scarf out of Notre Dame, and then Bayer Sharp out of LSU.
Yeah, so overall, solid draft for Tampa. They've been taking a wide receiver pretty much every draft, and they've been hitting fairly well here. And then Ruben Bain and Josh Trotter should be 2 really impactful picks for you. You're definitely leaving a gaping hole there with losing Levante David, who's one of the best linebackers of all time. But I definitely think their defense should be better next year. So I am excited with Tampa Bay's draft there. And then hopefully Ted Hurst can do a little bit and then be a solid number 3 in that offense with Ime Ibuka.
Yeah, I hope so too. Now we have a couple more picks to cover. The Titans, they went, I think you actually nailed this pick. That first round pick, 4th overall, they take Carnell Tate out of Ohio State, who was the top wide receiver prospect. And then they get back into the first round and take Keldrick Folk out of Auburn, an edge rusher who was one of the higher rated edge rushers as well. So first round, they get defense and offense. Carnell Tate, now they have a number 1 receiver for Cam Ward. So like that pick a lot for them. And then Keldrick Folk. And then Anthony Hill Jr. from Texas, linebacker. Fernando Carmoa out of Arkansas. Nicholas Singleton out of Penn State, running back. D-tackle Jackie Marshall out of Baylor. Center Pat Coogan out of Indiana. And then tight end Jaron Kanik out of Oklahoma to round it out.
Yeah, definitely a solid draft. I did in my mock draft have Carnell Tate going to the Titans, so definitely a victory lap there. They mentioned in the offseason they were indicating that they're happy with where they are at with their running backs right now, really just trying to go out and get Cam Ward a number one wide receiver, and then you went out, signed some decent pieces as well on offense. So I do think he's going to help Cam Ward there. And then Keldrick Falk out of Auburn, also another first round pick. He's going to be a great fit in Robert Sala's system. And then if you hit on Anthony Hill Jr., this is a team that also spent a lot of money. The Titans are a team where maybe they don't make the playoffs, but they're about a year or two away from being a legit playoff contender.
Yeah, I would agree. I like the addition of Carnell Tate. Their offense should be better. He had, for somebody who was starting out, Cam Ward had maybe the worst receiver core in the NFL. Had the most drops of anybody. Carnell Tate should help that problem. And then Keldrick Falk, I think, should be effective right away. But this is a team that has a lot of holes. So it's a step in the right direction. But ultimately, they still have another year or two before they're competing in that division.
But I like it a lot, and I do think San Francisco's defense playing as well as it did with all their injuries last year was kind of being held together by the duct tape that is Robert Saleh. So he can definitely coach his ass off on defense. So I'm excited to see what the Titans do next year, especially with this draft and Carnell Tate going there. Then we have our last team, and last but probably least is the Washington Commanders. They are pretty much voted by every single team as the worst place to play. They have sewage leaking in the locker room. They have cold showers there, probably the worst food and stadium in the league. And they didn't have too many picks in this draft. They only had 2 picks in the first 3 rounds. And they get Sonny Styles out of Ohio State, and then they get Antonio Williams out of Clemson. Then after that, they go with Joshua Josephs out of Tennessee. Then you get running back Katron Allen out of Michigan, center Matt Golban, and then you take a quarterback out of Rutgers in Athan Kalaimanis. So overall, like outside of Sonny Styles, I'm not blown away with this draft, and I don't think you're necessarily solving all of the glaring holes that this team had, specifically with getting younger, because you had one of the oldest defenses in the league coming into the offseason, and now you only added 2 players to that defense in the draft. And one of them's a
Yeah.
fifth round pick.
Yeah, Sonny Styles should be effective right away. He's going to fill in. He'll be a day one starter. But Joshua Josephs, it's unsure whether that fifth round pick's going to fill right in. And then I didn't like that they mostly addressed the offensive side of the ball. I feel like that's the situation that's probably the most secure. You have Terry McLaurin. Your running backs aren't amazing, but filling that hole in the 6th round rather than earlier doesn't make sense to me. Antonio Williams out of Clemson, we shall see. And then with their 7th round pick, getting a quarterback, like all these quarterbacks that are available that you can just sign, but instead you waste a 7th round pick on. I don't love that. So honestly, of all the teams, I think the Commanders probably are the worst of all the teams we've covered because they didn't really fill any of their holes.
Yeah, they didn't have that many picks either. So I definitely think next season's probably going to be a rough one. And if the Commanders are generous, we probably only have about 2 more years of Dan Quinn with the Commanders, unfortunately. It's like they went from the team that was supposed to take over the NFC, but like not only that, it's just in your division. Like, I am concerned for the health of Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels and Jackson Dart and Dak Prescott with the Giants' defensive line. And then if the Eagles hit on their pick out of Nigeria, you have Jalen Carter and him coming through the middle of your offensive line right in your lap. And then Cowboys having 2 first-round picks on defense. Like, I think this division is going to be brutal for the Commanders to get through. It might be the
Yeah,
worst
and I
team.
think of all the teams. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, maybe you have your quarterback, but the Giants got better this offseason. The Cowboys got better this offseason. Eagles were already much better than you. And sure, maybe they take a step back next year, but they're still better than you. So the Commanders, they didn't get much better. I still have concerns about their running back position. I still have concerns about their second overall receiver outside of Terry McLaurin. their offensive line, which they didn't really address in this draft either, outside of Matt Golban out of Michigan State. So, like, on top of that, your offensive line having to deal with how good those other defenses should be. And then your defense is just old as hell. So, barring injuries, like, your team's going to probably have some issues there. So, this might be the worst team in the NFC East at this point.
Yeah, I would definitely see it. So we'll see, but that is all 32 teams draft picks. That is right. We just went through every single pick in the NFL draft in about an hour and a half. So definitely a must listen episode. Go back, just listen. We'll go over all the picks for you. Don't need to think about it. Then you'll be educated on what every single NFL team did in the draft. And then we also had the NBA playoffs going on at the same time. And let's kind of get some of the, let's say, bad series out of the way first. Easily the worst series in the first round, the Phoenix Suns versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. This has just been a messy series. We had Alex Caruso call a technical foul. First time I've ever seen a player call a technical foul in NBA history, just because Devin Booker saved the ball and somehow it ended up a technical. And then Dylan Brooks has been the bright spot for the Suns. That's not necessarily something that you want to echo as far as a team that wants to be a serious contender here. But the Suns lose Kevin Durant, end up making the playoffs, and then this is just exactly what we thought it would be. And it's SGA averaged 34 points, led the league in scores. Jalen Williams went out in the series with another hamstring injury. And it just didn't matter because they traded for Jared McCain in the offseason from the 76ers. They have Case and Wallace on this team. Chet Holmgren, like, I feel like people forget that he is still getting better. Like, he is still a very young NBA player. So I think we've seen him get just a little bit mature this year. But the Thunder are just a very well-oiled machine. And I think the most boring series in the next round is probably going to be Lakers and Thunder, especially if Luka isn't playing.
Yeah. My biggest takeaway is like game one, that set the tone for the rest of the series. 84 points for the Suns. Thunder just completely annihilated them. And then it was a little bit closer in game two, but you still weren't really competing too much. It wasn't all that close. It got a lot closer in the fourth quarter. But Dylan Brooks, he drops 30 for you. Devin Booker plays okay, doesn't play exceptional, especially when you should be that main scorer for them. And then game three, it's the same story. The Thunder have beat them by over 10 in each and every game, and right now they're about to win in about 45 seconds to sweep them. So the main takeaway for the Suns is, like, good story, regular season-wise. Congratulations. You made it out of the play-in tournament. We expected you to suck. You were a lot better than we expected, but at the end of the day, your number two is Dylan Brooks. And honestly, at points this season, Dylan Brooks has been your best player. Is Devin Booker going to be on your team next year? That's the main question. But they don't have any picks. Their cap space is in hell. Devin Booker is getting older, and he might not be a Sun much longer. So, yeah, this is exactly what I expected, and not a lot of excitement as far as the Suns are concerned come next year.
Yeah, and the Thunder, like, they're going to end up in the conference championship. And then it's kind of just disappointing that Devin Booker hasn't been able to do more. I feel like ever since that finals run, we haven't seen, like, the playoff Devin Booker return, where it seemed like he had 2 or 3 good years where it looked like he was about to take a step into the echelon of the top 10 players in the league. And now he's kind of become, like, just a cheap foul merchant too. Like, if you put him on a team like the Knicks, he'd probably be good, but he's also one of those players that needs the ball in his hands to be good, but he's not good at playing, like, point guard and running an offense. So
No. He's not much of a facilitator. Honestly, the team that makes the most sense for Devin Booker, quite honestly, is the Pistons, a team that could use another scorer, because for the Suns, they need draft picks. They don't have any. So if they can call up the Pistons and get, say, maybe 3 first-round picks, you get Devin Booker, and then maybe you swap some players there for the contracts, like, that makes the most sense. It would devastate the Phoenix faithful to see Devin Booker go, but this Suns team is a long way away from competing seriously. You'd have to get another superstar in there, like maybe Giannis, but otherwise, like, the Suns team's not going anywhere, and they're going to just continuously be a play-in tournament team until they end up making a serious move, whether that's breaking up with Devin Booker or going out and getting someone like Giannis.
But such it goes with Phoenix teams there. But that is the Thunder and Suns. For me, this was the most obvious sweep coming into it, and this is the only series that's actually going to be a sweep here. And I'd say probably the next worst series to watch has been the Lakers and Rockets. When you're getting beat by Marcus Smart, you're probably a really bad team. Especially like Marcus Smart has legitimately been the Lakers' honestly go-to scorer outside of LeBron. LeBron's playing point guard, and he has Marcus Smart and Luke Kennard playing the best basketball of their career. And then Houston can't do anything. They're not a good three-point shooting team without Kevin Durant. All time with Kevin Durant out this season. They've been +7, but I think the real story in this game is Kevin Durant playing the most minutes in the regular season and then just being injured the last two games. Where I never want to say that they're faking an injury, but with this one, it's like, come on. It's just like
Yeah.
Fred VanVleet's out, Steven Adams is out, Kevin Durant's out. Seems like they're giving Ime Udoka an excuse, and then they're going to keep him next year. But this Rockets team took a step back from where they were last year. Honestly, Dylan Brooks probably would have been better on this team than trading him for Kevin Durant and then Jalen Green. The combination of him and Dylan Brooks on this team, even if Fred VanVleet still isn't there, I think would probably have been better than Kevin Durant, who didn't play more than one game in the playoffs for you. And you clearly took a step back. You just took the Warriors 7 games in the first round last year, and you were the number 2 seed. And then you struggled to get to the 5 seed this season. And Şengün looks like he's taking a step back instead of taking his game to the next level.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I think Sengun could be a top 10 player in the league if he can get the tools right. But Kevin Durant, he plays one game, has 9 turnovers in that game, doesn't do particularly much else otherwise, doesn't facilitate the ball. Team struggles from the 3 point line. I think the main takeaway for the Lakers, though, is LeBron. I mean, you can say what you want about LeBron James, but 41 years old, and he's carrying the Lakers against the Rockets. He had 13 assists in game one, and then he had a clutch three in, I want to say, game four as well. So helping them win that game in overtime as well. Doing really well. Luke Kennard stepped up in game one for them, and then the past few games, it's been the Marcus Smarts of the world making some big shots for them, getting some big stops. Luke Kennard stepping up as well. So for me, I think it's LeBron. That's been the big takeaway for me, how well he's played. And then the lack of soul for the Rockets, honestly. The Rockets just seem like they don't want to be there.
Yeah, they're getting dominated by DeAndre Ayton, who was kind of a joke during the regular season. He's like crying
Yeah.
about not wanting to be Clint Capella, having a mental breakdown, like, don't turn me into Clint Capella. And then he comes out there, gets 19 points, 10 rebounds. He's been a solid player for you. You have players like Jackson Hayes, Bronny is giving you okay minutes. But yeah, I think the Lakers, they're not going to beat the Thunder, but I think it's more of a story of how disappointing the Rockets have been and them taking a step back where I don't think you're better with Kevin Durant over the next 5 years than with Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks. It's like, is this really the best trade that you could have gotten for those two guys? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a win for the Suns at this point, if anything. The Suns got Dylan Brooks, and we saw how he stepped up in this Thunder series. Um, and then they got Jalen Green, who didn't play too much. But for the Rockets, the fact that your main star isn't playing in the first round of the playoffs, and on top of that, he's 38 years old and he's got 20 seasons under his belt. Like, why was this the move to move you over the top? When he's also burned his bridges in OKC, he's burned his bridges in Golden State, Brooklyn, Phoenix, and now the Rockets. People want to make fun of making trades for James Harden, but at least the Cavs have him playing against the Raptors, and he's played pretty well for them. Where Kevin Durant, like, this has just been the case. He had the same case with him in Brooklyn, same case in Phoenix last year, and then the same thing in Houston. Like, at this point, he can't stay healthy, and he's not going to elevate any team that he's on at this point.
Yeah. So Kevin Durant, like, he's a good addition to your team, but wouldn't necessarily want to give up too much for him. And I think the Rockets definitely made a mistake and took a step back this year. So that is the Rockets and Lakers. That will probably be over in 5. And then we start to get into some more interesting series. This series was a conversation for a second. Victor Wembanyama goes out with a concussion, but we get to see the Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper game, and these are the youngest pair of teammates in NBA history to score more than 20 plus apiece in the NBA playoffs. So Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, youngest duo in NBA history to get 20 plus. I believe Stephon Castle had 33 points in that game. Dylan Harper had 27 points, which was his season high in that one. And then Victor Wembanyama comes back, and he is one of 4 players in NBA history to have a 27, 10, and 5 game where he had 20, or he's actually Victor Wembanyama became the first player since Shaq in 2004 to record 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 blocks in a playoff game. If you include his 4 steals in his game, only Hakeem Olajuwon has ever matched that specific versatility. So he did something that was one of very rare company. And if you're with Hakeem and Shaq, I get people are like, oh, well, Wemby's that tall, he should be that good. It's like, well, Giannis is also tall, strong, and athletic, and doesn't have a jump shot, and he's never done this either.
We've had plenty of other players that were 7'4" or taller too. Like Manute Bol was 7'7", and he wasn't. I mean, he was good at blocking, but then we have the Hashim Thabits of the world, Bol Bol. These are another prime example of people who are super tall but don't do what Wemby does. Wemby at this point is probably the face of the league, or soon will be, especially if he wins the title. 7 blocks, had led the league in blocks last year, even though he missed 30 games. Like, we're talking about a guy that is a once-in-a-generation talent. So, yeah, I mean, and the other thing, as far as this series is concerned, you missed a real opportunity when they didn't have Wembanyama, and then you have De'Aaron Fox. Stephon Castle has a huge game for you. Dylan Harper steps in. That was the moment for the Trailblazers to step up. That was a missed opportunity for Dini. I can't pronounce his name. Advia. He shoots 3 of 15. Doesn't shoot particularly well from the field. And then there's not a guy like Scoot Henderson who steps up necessarily. Drew Holiday plays well, but missed opportunity there. This could be a series that could be going to 6 or 7 games. And now Wemby comes back, and now the series is over.
Yeah, and this is a game where game 4 they're down by 18 going into the half. It was 59-41, and then the Spurs come out and just dominate in the second half. You have Victor Wembanyama, who had a game high plus 28 in this game, putting up one of the rarest stat lines in NBA history. And you can get away with playing Robert Williams against someone like Luke Cornett when Wemby isn't there. But when he comes back, this is a team that goes from competing with the Blazers in close games to dominating them. And I'm glad they got some experience without Wemby, because they showed someone like Devin Vassell, De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, and Dylan Harper can all step up in a big moment. Keldon Johnson had a huge 3 in this game, and this team is deep, and it's a good combination of youth with players like Carter Bryant, Castle, and Dylan Harper. Then you also have Luke Cornett, Harrison Barnes, Bismack Biyombo, and Kelly Olynyk on this team, so you have some leadership. So I do like the variety that San Antonio has. So as of right now, they look like the only team in the West that could potentially challenge the Thunder. But I like that the Portland Trailblazers actually made them think. I'm happy to see like Tiago Splitter get a win in the playoffs at least, but there's not really anything Portland can do against this team. It's just a matchup nightmare.
Yeah, but I also think like they get a win against them, and they almost get to 2 games had they had a better game from Dini. From Dini. Yeah, I'm never going to pronounce.
They call him Dennicide because he was with the
Dennicide.
IDF.
We're going to call him Dennicide for simple sake. But the fact that they were close to pushing it to a 6-game series, and they still potentially could if they come out next game, but they get a win. And for a team that not a lot of people believed in going into it, The fact that they've been able to play as well as they have, that's a win. And then next year, you're going to have Damian Lillard. So Trailblazers have a lot to look forward to. But unfortunately, yeah, the Spurs, they're just a matchup nightmare. They're so much better offensively and defensively. So, yeah, this series is a wrap.
Yeah, and they won both games in Portland, and one of them was without Wemby. Like, that's huge for you. And a lot of people have been giving shade to De'Aaron Fox, which I don't get. Like, I think De'Aaron Fox is a fine player for this team. I think he's a good fit because with a player like Wemby, you don't necessarily need the most elite talent. You just need a team that makes sense together, where everyone can play their role well. And I think he does.
Yeah, and I mean, you have a super athletic De'Aaron Fox who is a bucket, who can facilitate. So I think De'Aaron Fox is a beast. I don't know if he's quite in the same comp as like a Jamal Murray with the Nuggets, but he's a guy that I think is an elite point guard and is athletic and get a bucket for you, which getting that second scorer alongside Wemby, that's really all you need.
And then Jason Tatum became the first Celtics player in history to record 30 points, 10 assists, and 5 or more three-pointers in a postseason game. And then he also joined the Elite Club, which is the 3,000, 1,500 club. He is now one of only 15 players in NBA history to reach 3,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, 500 assists in the playoffs, joining legends like LeBron James, Michael Jordan, and Kobe Bryant. Tatum also passed Kobe Bryant for 11th place all time in playoff three-pointers made. He surpassed legends like Klay Thompson and James Worthy as well, and moved in the 28th place all time in playoff scoring. So he's a top 30 playoff performer so far. And then at his age, he is the second youngest player in NBA history to reach 3,000 career playoff points, trailing only LeBron James, who was drafted out of high school. Pretty big advantage there. And then he already holds the record for most playoff points scored before the age of 27. To go on, he has the most wins since 2017, since entering the league in the playoffs. And then he currently ranks 4th in Celtics history for total points. And then he's been a double-double machine. His game 1 performance, he had 25 and 11. It was his 38th career double-double with 28, which places him 3rd in franchise history behind Larry Bird, who has 61. And then he has also been averaging 25, 9, and 9 in this playoff series, coming off an Achilles injury. And he has the best field goal percentage against, where he's had 50 field goals attempted against him as a defender, and his opponents are shooting 35%, which is the best in the NBA playoffs. So he's also statistically the best defender in the playoffs right now, all coming off an Achilles injury. I know that was a lot, but
That's a lot of stats. So I heard 3,000 career points at this point, which is now the youngest player to do that. He's in the conversation with Michael Jordan, LeBron, Kobe. He's got legends from the Celtics that he's surpassing as well. Showing to be an elite performer. He already has a championship ring. If he gets another NBA championship this year, this is when we need to start talking about this guy as an all-time great, especially as a double-double machine that he's been. Coming off of an Achilles tear just 9 months before, he's only played, I believe, 18 games post-injury. So, I mean, the Sixers have no chance at that point. If you have Tatum doing that well, Jaylen Brown has been efficient for you. Peyton Pritchard is dropping 30 points off of the bench and hitting last-second threes to end the quarters as well. I mean, Tyrese Maxey's a nice story. VJ Edgecombe's a nice story. Joel Embiid playing is a nice story, but the Sixers have no chance. We want Boston. No, you don't.
yeah, I think like the biggest thing is Tatum hitting that 3,000 point mark. The fact that he's one of only 15 players now that has 3,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, and 500 assists is insane. And he has the most points in the playoffs since 2020, so it's the most points in the decade. And then he's doing this coming off an Achilles injury, and you can argue that he's looking better than he did last year. And you don't necessarily say it's a good thing that he got hurt, but the fact that he was sitting on the bench all season with the coaching staff, and he was talking about on Derek White's podcast how he started to view the game a little bit more from the coach's perspective, and he kind of got a better idea of what the Celtics need, whereas Jaylen Brown's going to be making plays primarily out of ISO, and then he's become a much better playmaker, getting guys the ball there, and then he's been an elite scorer. He's been getting to his spot in the mid-range where Jason Tatum's been running a lot of pick-and-pop action, whether it's with Vucevic, getting lobs to Neemias Queta, and he's become the facilitator for this offense. So I think him sitting out most of the season, Jaylen Brown just being the number one go-to ISO guy, and Jason Tatum being the facilitator, this is one of the more efficient Celtics teams I've seen. And the fact that he's coming off an Achilles injury and statistically is one of the best defenders in the NBA playoffs, holding his opponents to 35% from the field. I think this is something that people just aren't talking about enough, and they kind of just dropped it as soon as he came back from the Achilles injury. But I still think that this should be the biggest story of the NBA playoffs, is just how well he's playing, because people are like, well, he may come back. How good is he going to be? Like, he's only getting better. And he hit the 2 threes at the end of the game in game 3, and people are like, well, you know, the Sixers had a bad game, and then game 4, he just comes back and goes for 37 and 11. And then Peyton Pritchard hits a buzzer beater at the end of the first quarter, which seemingly looked like it ended the series for the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, they were deflated there. But I agree. I mean, Jason Tatum coming off of the injury, sometimes I think there's benefits to players getting injured. I think there's not necessarily the injury themselves, but how it could impact the team. And this is one of those injuries that could have killed the Celtics. If this would have happened maybe 7 years ago, back when they had Kyrie, that could have been the complete end of the Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown experience. But now at this point, Jaylen Brown stepped in. He was an MVP candidate at one point. Tatum comes back, and he understands what he needs to be on that team. If he's going to be a facilitator, a guy who's an elite passer, I like to see it. And then as far as like defensively, 35% from the field, for me, that interests me when they go and face Jalen Brunson next round, potentially, when they go and face Cade Cunningham, potentially, in the Eastern Conference Finals. But most importantly, if they make the NBA Finals and they're facing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Tatum's paired up against him, that's an advantage where if you can take him down a notch and SGA is not this elite scorer that he's been, then the Celtics could very well beat the Thunder in the Finals.
Yeah, and I think they'd probably put Tatum on someone like Chet and Karl Anthony Towns, but he can switch 1 through 5. He's one of the most versatile defenders in the league, and I feel like he should be getting the Kawhi Leonard treatment, because when Kawhi Leonard was doing similar things defensively and offensively, the difference is Kawhi Leonard has never been this good of a passer and at running pick and roll action. Like, Kawhi is a good ISO scorer, but he couldn't handle the Warriors throwing double teams at him, where Jason Tatum has definitely been able to take on double teams and improve as a passer. And it kind of started in the playoffs last a couple of years ago with him getting triple doubles, and he's just continued it on, and then he's almost averaging a triple double in the first round too. So I definitely think the Celtics are better this year. I mean, defensively, they held the Sixers to 37 points in the first half. Most teams get that in a quarter on a given night too. And then I think the real story too with the 76ers is Joel Embiid's new contract starts next season, and Paul George has 2 years left on his deal. So if you look up Joel Embiid and Paul George's contract, they're going to be making, with when you add in Tyrese Maxey's contract next season, they will have $10.5 million to fill out the 12 other spots on the roster after those 3 guys are considered.
Did you say $12 million?
No, 10. They have
That's insane.
$10.5 million after you factor in Joel Embiid's, Paul George's contract, and Tyrese Maxey's. They're going to have $10.5 million to fill out 12 roster spots in a city like Philadelphia. So I think the writing on the wall is Embiid is out the door. Paul George's contract is a little bit easier to get out of if you trade him in 2 years, but this is going to be a team that I think you should take some positives out of that. I was definitely a little bit worried as a Celtics fan with them facing the Philadelphia 76ers in the first round because of VJ Edgecombe and Tyrese Maxey just they cause matchup problems for the Celtics, and we saw the game that they had in game 2. But I think if you can trade Embiid to maybe a dumber franchise that would give up a haul for him, and then start to build a team around Tyrese Maxey and VJ Edgecombe and see if anyone's willing to take on Paul George's contract, I think you'd have to pay him like a 15% kicker if you traded him this year.
Yeah, I looked up Joel Embiid's contract. He has a player option in 2028 for $67 million. And by then, Joel Embiid is going to be 34 years old, and he's played like what, 30% of his games the last couple of years. You don't
Not
think he's
even.
going to pick up that 67% Yeah, that's ridiculous. Paul George is going to be making $54 million next year. Tyrese Maxey is going to start making $40 million. And then eventually you're going to have to sign PJ Edgecombe, he's got a couple more years because he's a rookie. But now you have to fill out, that means Andre Drummond. They can't even afford Andre Drummond at this point. Andre
It's just
Drummond might be out the door. Devastating. So,
who's never won a
yeah.
first round series, by the way. They were talking about it on the broadcast. They're like, Nikola Vucevic and Andre Drummond have never been out of the first round of the playoffs.
Oh, God. I'm not surprised. Yeah, but that's scary, especially like they're essentially going to be signing minimum level players for pretty much even their starting lineup at that point. So that's a nightmare. Good luck to the Sixers. But yeah, the best move, I would trade Joel Embiid if you can. But is
Are
someone
the
going to take
Knicks
him?
that dumb? Like, or could
I
you
think
get a
the
haul from
dumbest.
Brooklyn and get someone like Michael Porter Jr. and a couple other players from the Nets? Like, I just don't know who is dumb enough to take on Joel Embiid's contract, because if no one wants to trade for Embiid, they're screwed. Because Paul George doesn't really have a huge market of people clamoring for him either. I mean, he's been good enough. He's actually been better than I thought he would be versus the Celtics in this round, just as a solid veteran player. But he's not even a 3 or a 4 on a championship team. So
The only team dumb enough that I can see trading for Joel Embiid is the Suns. Because if they don't have to give up picks for him and they can just swap like Dylan Brooks for them, that's a team that I can see, especially because Matt Ishbia is a horrible owner and he kind of strikes me. He's like the NBA equivalent of Steve Cohen for the Mets in baseball. He makes big swings, but they've all missed so far as an owner, both of them at this point. So I think it's going to be the Suns that go and trade for Joel Embiid, and nobody in Phoenix is going to like it, but he's going to try to pair Devin Booker and Joel Embiid together, just like they did with Kevin Durant. And they're not going to have to give up a bunch of picks. They're just going to have to basically trade Dylan Brooks and I don't know, Grayson Allen, and that'll be it.
yeah, and the other team I could think of would potentially be a team that we can talk about now in the Cleveland Cavaliers, where you have a package of centered around Evan Mobley going to the 76ers, because Cleveland is kind of in the same predicament that they're always in. You compared this team to like the 2010s version of the Toronto Raptors with DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. Definitely fun, but unreliable. And they're in a series with the Toronto Raptors, and it feels like deja vu. Do you remember the series that they had? It was like 2 years ago against the Orlando Magic, where it went 7 games, and then just the home team won every single game, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, we're back.
That's a
Yeah, and the
deja vu.
Raptors are significantly less talented than the Cavs. The Cavs have Hall of Famer James Harden. They have Donovan Mitchell, and you have Evan Mobley on that team, along with some other studs on the bench as well. Max Strus has been really good off the bench for you guys the last couple of years. Jarrett Allen has been good for you. Dennis Schroeder, who's a guy that's bounced around, he's been successful. But now the last 2 games, one game you get destroyed when you get back to Toronto, and you have fucking Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett combined for 66 points. And then the next game, you guys can't muster up 90 points because Donovan Mitchell shoots 25% from the field. James Harden under 40%. Max Strus doesn't make a single shot. He scores 1 point. Like, complete disaster. And then in the previous game, you had James Harden with 8 turnovers. Like what is happening to this Cavs team? At this point, the Raptors probably deserve to win this series more than the Cavs do.
Yeah, because the Raptors don't have too much playoff experience, but you do what you do have is a lot of big wing defenders, and then you have Ricardo Boyles, who's your rookie this year, and he's played really good minutes for you at the center position, being an undersized player there. And then you have R.J. Barrett, who's starting to defend James Harden and Donovan Mitchell really well, along with Scotty Barnes, and then Brandon Ingram was really the person who started to come alive at the end of Game 4. My only thing with this series, it has been the home team has pretty much won every single time, but I don't necessarily know if James Harden's going to show up. And the biggest problem outside of Donovan Mitchell over the past few years for Cleveland in the playoffs has just been that Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley get beat up and manhandled in the post. There's that one season where they were supposed to beat the New York Knicks in the first round. It was the year that the Miami Heat went to the finals and beat the Knicks in the second round, and then they just got manhandled by Isaiah Hartenstein and Mitchell, but
Mitch
for the
Robinson.
Knicks, and then yeah, and then last year they were supposed to beat the Indiana Pacers. They were the number 1 seed. They're supposed to beat them in the second round, and then Tyrese Halliburton and the Pacers end up beating them. So this team has definitely underachieved, and it starts with Donovan Mitchell, but Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley have done this team no favors, and they mustered up a combined 9 points in the last game in Toronto. Both of them have been terrible, and then Evan Mobley's only shooting 30% from three. So his shooting percentage and efficiency has gone down. Sure, he led the league in dunks, but in the playoffs, you would think that an athletic big like Mobley and Jarrett Allen would help you, but they've kind of just got worse at the end of each series. So I do think that the Toronto Raptors will be able to steal one, and then we're going to be in for a 7-game war between them and Orlando because we go to Orlando and they beat the Detroit Pistons again tonight. They come out in game 1 and shock the Pistons, and people are like, okay, this is the number 1 seed that has been a little bit rusty. Cade Cunningham still coming off an injury, and then it's a little bit of a fluke. Game 2, the Pistons end up going on a 30-3 run. And just looking at it, and I'm like, my goodness, the Magic haven't scored in like 8 minutes. It was ridiculous. And then the last 2 games, it's been Franz Wagner and Desmond Bane just taking over in Orlando. The game that they just played tonight was the Magic jumping out on top. The Pistons respond and take the lead, and then the Magic took the lead heading into the half, and then they're pretty much just up 4 points the entire second half. Anytime they needed a big shot Bane was hitting it. He had John Morant giving him the gun signal at the side of the court, and then Triple J was also there supporting Desmond Bane as well. But it's looking like we're probably going to get Magic and Raptors in the second round, and I don't think anyone had that on their bingo card for the NBA playoffs.
You know what scares me the most about the Magic at this point? There's 2 things. Well, for one, I've heard a lot of people floating around. Does this speak more to the Magic as far as being better than what an 8th seed typically is? Or is this about the Pistons being chokers at this point? And I think it speaks more to how good the Magic actually are. The scary part about Game 4 is Paulo Banchero shot 4 of 18, Jalen Suggs shot 1 of 13, and then Desmond Bane didn't shoot particularly well either, and they still won by 6. So Jalen Suggs doesn't usually shoot 1 of 13. Paulo Banchero, he's probably good for 45% from the field, and you still won. And the main issue with the Pistons at this point is who is your scorer outside of Cade Cunningham? Cade Cunningham didn't shoot particularly well from the field tonight, but then your next scorer at that point is Tobias Harris. And nobody should have your number 2 be Tobias Harris in 2026. Hell, it shouldn't have been that way in 2017 either. So that's the biggest problem for the Pistons. And that's going to haunt them in this series. If they somehow make it out of this 3-1 deficit and end up winning, that's going to be their detriment next round. But the writing's on the wall. I think the Magic are going to beat them in Game 5, and we're going to see the Pistons pack their stuff up early because ultimately they need another score.
Yeah, and I compared the Magic to similar to the We Believe team, and I think 2 things can be true. I think the Pistons are choking a little bit because Cade Cunningham has had stretches where he's had a lot of turnovers with this team. But again, you look at it, and Duncan Robinson is starting, and he's a defensive liability. He had a game high minus 18 when Duncan Robinson was on the floor. And then it's also been Jalen Duren, who's completely disappeared. And I've talked to a few Detroit Pistons fans, just like casually, and the national media and people really didn't follow the Pistons too closely, but they are genuinely shocked about how bad Jalen Duren has been in the playoffs. This is a guy hitting legitimate mid-range shots in the regular season. He was a force on offense. He was playing like it was a contract year, and he just has been disappointing. Only had 12 points in this game. And then Tobias Harris is famous for being chosen over Jimmy Butler by the Philadelphia 76ers. And it seemed like anytime that the Boston Celtics played the Philadelphia 76ers, Tobias Harris would just disappear when they needed him. And this was honestly, I mentioned this about the Pistons going into the playoffs. I'm like, I get their good, big, strong, physical team, but Cade Cunningham goes 7 for 23, shoots 30% in this game. He's 3 for 11 from 3. I mean, he has 25 points, but again, at what cost? He's still a -7 in this game.
Yeah. And Jalen Duren, in the regular season, he scored about 20 points a game, 10 rebounds, shot 65%, which was fourth in the league. So far, through these 4 games, this game he had 12 points, 8 rebounds, but in the series as a whole, 9 points on average. In this series, he's shooting 41%, which is almost 25% less than in the regular season. And his rebounds have dropped by about 2 per game as well. So hasn't been particularly well with rebounding the ball, hasn't been a good shooter, hasn't been putting points on the board. So it's just been a mess. This has been an awful, awful series for Jalen Duren. And then at that point, like we mentioned, the Pistons, outside of Cade Cunningham, it's Tobias Harris, Duncan Robinson, who hasn't shot particularly well either. And then they don't really have much of a bench outside of them either.
Yeah, and this Magic team just feels like one of those fun, gritty playoff teams because they're a big, strong, physical team. Franz Wagner has been the one that's come up clutch in these big moments. He took over at the end of Game 3 when Detroit made a run on them in the fourth quarter, and then he gets 19 points in Game 4. He's a game high, plus 17, and then Desmond Bane went 6 for 6 from 3 in Game 3, and then in Game 4 he goes 5 for 10 from 3, has 22 points, and then he hit the shot that iced this game, and he banked in a 3. So at the end of Game 3, you have the shot where Paulo bounces it off the back of the iron. It like stays up there for 10 seconds and falls in, and then you have Desmond Bane who banks in a 3. Like two of the most fluky shots if you're Detroit, and then it's just an absolute dagger. So I don't see them pulling their way out of this. And really, like, this is a team that was just injured throughout the entire season. Like, Franz and Paulo were both banged up. And then they come back, and this is a team that probably should have been the 4 seed over Cleveland if both those guys played the whole regular season. But now you're going to lose in the first round, and we're probably going to get Toronto and Orlando, and that's going to be another series where most of these games are, I mean, the last game with the Cavs and Raptors wasn't that high scoring. And then you're going to have these two teams who also didn't break 100 in this game, where it was 94 to 88. So almost the exact same score as the Raptors and Cavs game.
So essentially, whoever wins the Celtics versus Knicks or Hawks is the team that's going to make the finals at this point, because I think the Magic wrap it up. Cavs and Raptors, I don't know if I trust either one of those teams to make it out, but I guess I'll pick the Cavs. Honestly, I think the Magic's going to beat whoever beats that Raptors and Cavs game, and we're going to see them in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then it's Knicks and Hawks, this battle that has come out of it. The Hawks had 2 upsets in back-to-back games, winning by a last-second score. We had a C.J. McCollum fadeaway, and then another 32-point game in Game 3 as well. So Hawks, it's bringing it to 6 games at least. How have you thought about this Knicks and Hawks series?
Yeah, the series is kind of just how I predicted it. I took a look at these teams and saw the point differential between them when they played in the regular season was 3 points. I definitely thought the Knicks were going to win this series, and I picked the Knicks to win in six, and I still feel strongly about that. CJ McCollum got hot for 2 games, but I don't necessarily know if he's going to be able to do that for 2 more games here. So I do think that the Knicks snap out of it and then start to play more like they did in game four and then take the series. I wouldn't be shocked if it went seven, but the series is just playing out exactly how I thought. I thought game two and three were both really fun, and then game one and four just got away from Atlanta, and that's the next team we should see show up at the end of it here.
Yeah, Knicks should still prevail. I am curious if the Hawks can steal one more game. I think next game we see the Knicks take advantage, and then, but the Hawks have been frisky for him. CJ McCollum's played really well. We've had the Nickeil Alexander-Walker step in some moments as well. Jonathan Kuminga has played well off the bench, so they're a frisky team, and can they push them seven? We shall see, but it doesn't make me feel super optimistic about the Knicks struggling with the Hawks when we have the Celtics handling the Sixers with Peyton Pritchard and Derek White. I think at this point the Celtics should beat the Knicks, but Knicks should still end up beating the Hawks.
Yeah, Knicks should beat the Hawks, and Karl Anthony Towns has a triple double in this one, and that's something we haven't really seen him do too often. The only thing for the Knicks is where I would be concerned is that Jalen Brunson hasn't really played too well. He's had multiple games where he has shot below 40%. In game four, they still won it by a good margin, but Jalen Brunson's been struggling a little bit. And then if you go up against Boston, they've been putting Jordan Walsh on the opposing team's point guard. So they put Jordan Walsh on Tyrese Maxey. If he's going to be on Jalen Brunson, I do think it's going to be a long series for the Knicks. And the Celtics almost beat the Knicks at the end of the regular season when Jaylen Brown was resting, put Jason Tatum out there, and they almost won with just Pritchard and Tatum. So I do think the Celtics should win it this time around. I will pick that series to go seven, and I think we get a rematch of Celtics Magic.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. And then the last series to cover is the Nuggets and Timberwolves series, which we had picked the Nuggets to win this one. They had taken game one, and then a couple of games that have just kind of slipped away from them. Game two, the Timberwolves pull away in the fourth quarter. We had a 30-point Ant performance. And then in game three, they just kind of dominated throughout. Come game four, we had Ant go down with an injury along with Dante DiVincenzo, but Nuggets struggle there. Right now, through pretty much all the way up to the fourth quarter, Nuggets are blowing them out, but big thing is Ant is injured, Dante DiVincenzo is hurt, and the Nuggets face a 3-1 deficit. Do you think the Nuggets can make it out of this? Personally, I think they can. I think they, especially with the Timberwolves not having Ant, I think we're going to see the Nuggets overcome a 3-1 deficit.
Yeah, and just passively watching this game with the sound off, you can tell the Nuggets are playing with more force in this one, which is they kind of got pushed around by the Timberwolves in the first 3 games. And we had seen the Timberwolves do this to Jokic before. 2 years ago, when the Timberwolves jumped out and won the first 2 games in Denver, and then ended up pushing that to 7 games. But I do think with Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo out, it's just too much of a discrepancy in talent for the Minnesota Timberwolves to overcome. We've also seen the Nuggets come back from 2-3-1 deficits, so it's definitely something that they are familiar with. So just with the level of talent disparity and Aaron Gordon potentially coming back for Game 6, I do think that the Nuggets are going to come out on top in this series and win 3 straight because they ended the season on a 12-game winning streak, and then this one the Timberwolves really were able to play one-on-one with Nikola Jokic, with Rudy Gobert, and this is a team, like it or not, they've fallen apart defensively when Aaron Gordon isn't on the floor. They go from a top 10 defensive team to one of the worst defensive teams in the league, and with a player like Jokic, you can't hold him down for an entire series. So I do think he'll eventually figure out Rudy Gobert. But I will say, this is the best I've ever seen Rudy Gobert play in my life. And it is unfortunate to see Anthony, as much as I would like to see the Nuggets win, it doesn't feel the same when someone like Anthony Edwards misses some time with the bone bruise and is out for a week.
Yeah, and he's not going to end up playing the rest of the series, right? Most
He's
likely.
out for at least a week, so probably not.
So he's going to miss at least 2 games at worst, or at best, I should say. But, I mean, other Timberwolves that have stepped up, Julius Randle, he stepped up pretty well for them, at least in this game, being kind of their main scorer. Jaden McDaniels has played really well for them throughout this series. You mentioned Rudy Gobert, but also, what's his name? Ayu
Dosunmu.
Dosunmu. He had a 40-point game
43, yeah.
earlier this year. He had 33 no, he had 43 in game
In game
3, or I'm sorry, game 4. So had a huge scoring performance there, and then game 3 he had 25. So he stepped up quite a bit for a guy that was kind of a Bulls reject for what he's been able to do this postseason. Exceptional run for him, and hasn't really done too much in this game so far, but he's got 14. But I do think the Nuggets do crawl back and win it ultimately.
Yeah, and if they do win it, then we would have hit on every side of the bracket in the first round except the Orlando Magic and the Toronto Raptors potentially getting to the second round. And hey, Cleveland could still end up winning that series. I give both teams a 50-50 shot. And, as Charles Barkley says, it's not a series until the home team loses a game. And the Cavaliers have not lost in Cleveland yet. If we're getting into a game 7 and it's game 7 James Harden with Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, how they've been outplayed, I just don't love it, especially it seems like they're figuring out how to stop Donovan Mitchell. So I think Raptors and Magic would be a interesting, gritty, physical series. So that'd be the surprise, but we both predicted Knicks and Celtics in the second round, and then Nuggets win, then we'd had Nuggets Spurs, and then we both had Thunder and Lakers as well. So pretty accurate so far. I don't think anyone predicted the Magic to win, and I don't think anyone thought the Raptors would come out quite like this versus Cleveland and flip the script. But we've seen Cleveland do this before.
Yeah, we had the Magic being going 6 though. Like we had the Pistons and Magic being competitive, but I didn't expect the Magic to go up to a 3-1 lead. And now at this point, I feel like we should see the Pistons take Game 5, but I think the Magic close it out in 6 most likely. I was expecting the reverse. I expected Pistons in 6, but that was a series that just the Magic they've earned a lot of respect in this series.
Yeah, definitely for someone like Franz Wagner, who has kind of had a tough year. He wasn't able to play too much in the regular season, so you're seeing him and Paulo essentially playing themselves into shape in the playoffs, similarly to Jason Tatum, where they both played the same amount of time. And then just the addition of Desmond Bane has been huge for them. Wendell Carter has been balling out as well. Jalen Suggs, just as an energy guy, even if he's not scoring, he's always doing good things defensively, getting blocks in transition. So I do think that this Orlando Magic team could be what the Indiana Pacers team has been the past 2 seasons for us. And even if the Knicks do beat the Celtics, I actually think the Magic match up very well against the Knicks, and they match up better against the Knicks than they do against Boston. Especially because Karl Anthony Towns doesn't really like getting pushed around. You can put either Wendell Carter or Paulo on him, and then Franz Wagner is just going to be a nightmare matchup for OG and Josh Hart. I think he'd be able to get his way as well.
Yeah, I feel the most confident in them making the Eastern Conference Finals at this point. They're going to beat the Cavs or Raptors, so I don't think they beat the Celtics, but for the Knicks, that's a 6 or 7 game series right there. And then if Jalen Brunson's playing the way he has so far in the first round, then the Magic have a chance.
Yeah, if Jalen Brunson's also continues this into the second round, I think the Celtics should win in 5. I'll give the Knicks 6 as the benefit of the doubt. I think Jason Tatum would love to close out a game 6 in Madison Square Garden, just in front of Ben Stiller and Tracy Morgan.
Yeah.
Don't forget about him courtside.
Yeah, who could forget? But we have covered the NBA playoffs. We have covered the NFL draft. So we are now up to speed. We have covered all things NFL and NBA. Before we end, any things to shout out as far as what you've been watching this past week?
Yeah, as far as what I've been watching and what I've been listening to this week, put on a kind of preview track for the new Deserox album. He is essentially kind of a more blues rock, but he's inspired by like Freddie Mercury and Elvis. But he's one of those people. He's a really good guitar player, and the first four singles for his new album, Hell and Back, are out, and they've all been really good. This album, I think, is probably going to be his best overall, where he uses a lot of synths. So it's kind of almost like a modern dad rock, but like all the instrumentals are done really well. He has some good string sections. His guitar solos are always really tight. He released an album a couple of years ago called Dream Machine. That was also really good. And then if you go back through his catalog, pretty much all everything he's made is solid. And then you can tell the production has just really taken itself to another level in this one. So I saw him open for Kaleo, had not heard of him before, and then he came out. He was playing guitar behind his back, him and his bass player running back and forth across the stage. He's a very high energy performer, and he just feels like a throwback to one of those 80s or 90s rock star. Good singer, and then he can also play guitar really well live.
Yeah, you've shown me a couple of songs from him. I like him a lot. I feel like he hasn't really reached his peak yet as far as popularity wise, but from the songs you've showed me, I've liked him a lot. And I can kind of hear like it looks like his inspirations also like you have Queen, Elvis, Jimi Hendrix. You have a little bit of Muse in there as well, which I can definitely hear. So um, he's only released two studio albums. It looks like at this point, and then he has To Hell and Back that comes out later this year. So this could be the album I think that could make him even that much more bigger because he had This Is Our Life that charted, and then he had a couple other songs chart on the rock station, but I feel like he still hasn't had that big album yet that makes him not necessarily mainstream, but one of the more popular rock stars.
Yeah, because he's still doing like 1,500, 2,000 people venues right now, but he is connected with the UFC. Dana White saw him play a show in New York because that's where he's from. He grew up in Queens, so he played a show there. Dana White saw him, and now the UFC uses a couple of his songs. I know when we were at like Fit Lab, I Am the Lightning came on a lot. That was a more popular, like mainstream rock song. But overall, if you like old rock, you like good guitarists, and then you like a little bit of synths and Muse mixed in there, I would definitely check out his entire catalog. Each album sounds a little bit different, but this one just sounds very orchestral. He has like some string hits along with the power chord and bass on some of the songs, and then just the guitar riffs are very tight, so you have some really solid 4 minute tracks that just take you on a journey.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check him out. I'll check him out probably this week, most likely, especially because he's got a new album dropping too, and I feel
It's
like
a
there's
good
kind of a
gym
shortage
album.
of music.
The new
There's kind of a
singles are good for the
shortage.
gym.
There's been a shortage of good music of late that's dropped. I feel like a lot of the rap albums have kind of come and went for the most part, so some good rock would be good.
We got
Um,
Iceman in May.
yeah, I'll have you seen the rollout for Iceman
I
with the
saw
ice
that he
cubes?
just put drop like a giant block of ice. I don't know where it was, but he's like the album release date is
Uh,
in here. So he had a bunch of
yeah,
people trying to break it.
yeah, he got like a shit ton of ice that was supposed to melt in like a week, and then the Drake fans, because it was in Toronto, all the Drake fans like brought like pickaxes and they were like lighting fires on it, like, and they end up melting it prematurely. They get the release date, so May 15th, Aubrey Graham is back, but hopefully that's a good one. But what I've been watching of late, I started Eastbound and Down. Have you ever watched that with Danny McBride?
I
It's
haven't, no.
essentially so it's essentially like he is a baseball player who's washed up and he has like this super successful career, wins a World Series, and then arm starts to go, and now he's a PE teacher at his old high school that he went to high school at. And I've only watched two episodes, so I don't have too much insight on it, but it's a baseball show. Danny McBride's been funny in it. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like Trailer Park Boys, a little bit, that type of humor. But um, only two episodes in so far, but I like Danny McBride historically, so I think this should be good. But baseball centric. Saturday, I went to a baseball museum, went to the batting cages, and then saw an ASU game all on the same day. So I'm like, fuck it, let me check out this show that everyone's recommending to me. So baseball, very big baseball day, and then on Saturday, also the Red Sox fired their entire staff. So this is an eventful day for me on Saturday.
Yeah, isn't that crazy that they fired their entire staff because they don't want to sign their own players? I think it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. And then it's also awesome because it's 25 games into the season. So it'd be like if somebody fired their NBA coach after like 8 games. It's pretty much the equivalent. So yeah, I love baseball and I love the Red Sox and how much they suck all the time.
Do you think he was only fired because they refused to spend money? Or is he actually the problem?
He wasn't the problem. No, I mean, like, he's been a good coach for them. I think it's front office. Their front office made a bunch of bad moves. Their team they started off the worst team in baseball for the most part. So their gut reaction was, let's fire him and the entire staff and just make this season basically a lost cause at that point. So Red Sox, they're not making the playoffs. They're going to suck all year, and it's all because
It's like Brick froze here. Yeah, he just got kicked out. Um, that is that Phoenix internet. It's going to be getting pretty hot in Phoenix, Arizona. It's pretty hot here in Texas, but yeah, I guess Cox Communication isn't doing too hot in Phoenix with the temperature going up. Definitely messes with the Wi Fi there. But that is pretty much everything we're going to go over. We'll see if he can get back in here, but went over the entire NFL draft, watching the Nuggets and Timberwolves right now. Currently, it is a 13-point game, and the Nuggets are up with about 5 minutes left to go. So they were blowing out the Timberwolves the entire game, and now 13 points, less than 5 minutes. We've seen crazier things happen before. So Timberwolves still hanging around in this one. So definitely see what the Nuggets do. Also, you're going to keep Adelson after that. It's like, yeah, looks like comeback wins 2020 playoffs. This round versus Utah. They're down 13, won by 10. So we'll see. But yeah, Denver up 13, 5 minutes left. Timberwolves full court pressing them. So we'll see there. But yeah, looks like Brick is having Wi-Fi issues there. So that has been our entire show. Went ahead and recapped the entire NBA playoffs. So go ahead, check that out. Went over every single pick in the NFL draft, and most importantly, until we tune in next week, same time here around 10:30 Eastern time at night. Make sure you hit the like button